Mr. Clerk, just before I call this meeting to order, I'm going to wait for the two councillors just to be up and running on their app, just to make sure that we're good to go. Councillors, can you just give me a nod when you have your app running? You good? I'm just waiting for the two councillors to be on the app because we're going to need to vote on the first one. So, Councillor Della, are your app's up and running? Okay. Samantha. Can we manually put that one in, Mr. Clerk? So we can start? Can we manually put in her vote? Okay. Mr. Clerk, it's 7:03. I call this public planning meeting to order. Council, can I get a motion to approve the agenda? Moved by Councillor Thompson, second by Councillor Kim. Comments or questions? Seeing none, call the vote. Council, it will show up on your app. Councillor Humphreys. Mr. Clerk, who's missing on the vote? Who's missing on the vote? Councillor Thompson, did you vote? You have to hit submit? Thank you. That would help. You done it? Councillor Gilliland? You're good? You just did it? No, not yet? And we have Councillor Gartner on Zoom. So can we get Councillor Gartner then to vote? Councillor Gartner is joining us via Zoom. Councillor Gartner, how do you vote on the approval of the agenda? Thank you. That carries. Any declarations of pecuniary interest? Seeing none. Well, welcome to Aurora's public planning meeting. The purpose of the public meeting is to inform the public and obtain public input regarding the proposed official plan and zoning bylaw amendments. For the planning applications that will be considered by council tonight, the following process will occur. 1. Town planning staff will outline the purpose of the planning application being considered. 2. Then the applicant will be given an opportunity to make a presentation and address issues raised in the staff report or public concerns already filed. 3. Following these presentations, members of the public will be invited to offer their comments or concerns respecting the proposal, either in person or virtually. And 4, either town staff or the applicant will answer your questions. And I will keep track of the questions, and when I have several, I will direct them to whoever can best answer them. It is very important that the town receive the correct names and addresses of the individuals having an interest in the planning applications. Therefore, if you plan to speak to council at this meeting, or if you wish to be notified of any further council or committee meetings concerning the applications being considered, you must complete an interested party form available on the town's website at aurora.ca/planning notices, or contact Planning and Development Services by email at planning@aurora.ca. Under the Planning Act, the applicant or residents have the right to appeal any decision of council on a planning application to the local planning appeal tribunal, but you must verbally express any comments or concerns here tonight, or submit any comments or concerns in writing to the town prior to council adopting an amendment. The tribunal may dismiss all or part of an appeal made in respect of an application. This public meeting is being audio and video recorded. Names, addresses, comments, and any other personal information are being recorded according to the Municipal Act and the Municipal Freedom of Information and Protection of Privacy Act. This will help our town clerk prepare accurate minutes and to create a record that is available to the general public, including the town's website. Questions about this collection should be directed to the town clerk, Town of Aurora. I will now ask the town clerk to confirm that notification to the public occurred as required by the Planning Act.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. Respecting item 4.1, applications for official plan amendment and zoning bylaw amendment, 15516 Leslie Street, GP Inc., and 15,516 Leslie Street, Part Lot 22, Concession 2, Whitchurch, file numbers OPA 2020-03, ZBA 2020-03, related file number SP 2020-02. On July 2nd, a notice of complete application was published in the Auroran and Aurora Banner newspapers, and a sign giving notice of the complete application was posted on the subject lands. On August 27th, 2020, notices were mailed to all addressed property owners within a minimum of 120 meters of the subject lands, and additional properties beyond the minimum radius, including Starkweather Street, were also notified. Signage on the subject lands was updated with the public meeting information. On August 27th, 2020, a notice of public planning meeting was published in the Auroran and the Aurora Banner newspapers. Public notification has been provided in accordance with the Planning Act. Respecting item 4.2, applications for official plan and zoning bylaw amendment, RCG Aurora North, GP Inc., 16,005 to 16,055 Bayview Avenue, Whitchurch, Concession 2, Part Lot 26, Registered Plan 65R32530, Part 1, file numbers OPA 2020-04 and ZBA 2020-04. On July 9th, 2020, a notice of complete application was published in the Auroran and Aurora Banner newspapers, and a sign giving notice of the complete application was posted on the subject lands. On August 27th, 2020, notices were mailed to all addressed property owners within a minimum of 240 meters of the subject lands, expanded circulation area, and to all interested parties. Signage on the subject lands was updated with the public meeting information. On August 27th, 2020, a notice of public meeting was published in the Auroran and Aurora Banner newspapers. Public notification has been provided in accordance with the Planning Act.
Thank you, Mr. Clerk. I will now ask the Director of Planning and Development Services to begin with the presentations.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. We'll start off with the applicant presenting their proposal, and that will be followed by a staff presentation by Mr. LaPena.
Thank you. So we have first application 4.1, PDS 20-051, 15516 Leslie Street. Is the applicant here? Yes. Can we turn up the volume, Mr. Clerk? Could you speak a little bit louder?
Sure, I'll do that. Can everyone see my screen? That is me, sir.
Yes.
Named portion of the site is the developable portion, which is this proposed development is situated. The property also have a direct access onto Leslie Street with a full movement entrance, ingress, and egress. This is just a graphics demonstrating the surrounding context central to the subject property. There are ample of community facilities and amenities available in the area. At the northeast corner of Wellington Street and Leslie Street, there is an existing commercial plaza providing a lot of the retail needs, and also numerous parks, as you can see here, in the school west of the subject site, in between Leslie and Bayview Avenue. There's also a yard transit service along a portion of the Leslie Street corridor, which is about 5 minutes walking distance to the nearest bus stop, right at State Farm Way, servicing Loop route into the commercial plaza and on Wellington Street. I'm not getting into too much of the details in terms of the policy context, as staff will be covering that, but in a nutshell, the property is located within an urban area designated under the regional official plan. It is also designated urban residential 2 within the Aurora official plan and the 2C secondary plan, with a maximum height of 6-story or 20 meters and a density of 125 units per net hectare. The site is now currently shown as rural. So this is the original development proposal that we have submitted in February 2020. The proposal consists of 136 apartment units within a 7-story building massing, equivalents of 23.5 meters. It also consists of 3 levels of underground parking, providing 191 parking spaces for both the residents and the visitors. The application, as I mentioned, was submitted in February this year. It has gone through a full circulation to all the internal agencies, internal departments and external agencies. The application also gone through a DRP on June 29th, which we have received numerous comments, both from urban design and architectural perspective. I'm just going to highlight some of the comments that we have received for council so that you have an understanding of some of those, I guess, issues being raised. There has been comments as relates to the access and laneway that we have in our original proposal, a combination of those being as a result of a large expanse of pavement that's actually separating the building to the Leslie Street frontage, and also concern about the facility and loading area, which we have originally proposed to be at the northeast portion of the building. I'm just trying to hover my cursor over here. That's where we were proposing with the facility and loading area. So trucks would come in and go in from here. And also there has been some concern about the lack of distinct base from a ground level perspective from a design standpoint. And also comments about additional landscaping should be provided to the stuttered labor in between the southern property limits. So since the original submission and the DRP we had back in June, we have taken all the comments into our consideration and bring it back to the drawing board and work over the summer. And we were able to formalize a revised submission, which had been submitted to the town early September, which is about 2 weeks ago. The revised scheme involved a combination of design changes, which I'm going to walk you through in the next few slides. But predominantly, the building massing and envelope remain the same, given the physical constraint we have within the development portion of this property. If you recall, our original submission consists of 136 units. With the design and a bit and the tweaking of the building envelope, minorly, we were able to obtain 1 additional unit. The building massing is still stays that's the 7-story with the same height, and certainly the 3 levels of underground parking with the wood design. We were able to pick up a few more parking spots within the underground parking structure. As you can see here in this plan, the laneway has been removed based on the DRP comments that we have received. And in the next slide, I'll be able to better demonstrate that. So the graphics on the left-hand side represent the original submission, and the one at the bottom right represent the new revised submission. Once again, the building itself remains largely the same. We have removed the laneway and the loading garbage area from the northeast portion of the building. It's now situated closer to the central part of the building, which by virtue of doing that, we were able to provide additional landscaping and creating a much more pedestrian-friendly environment at the frontage of Leslie Street. As I mentioned previously as well, there has been some concern about the lack of distinct feature from an architectural standpoint. So we have extended the canopy from the first floor, not only creating a cover for the residents in the area, but it's also creating an animated facade for the building. And obviously, with the change of the laneway and access, we were able to move the laneway a little furthest from our south property line in order to accommodate a little bit more of the landscaping that the DRP has expressed their concern about. This figures essentially illustrate the traffic maneuvering through, in between the original and the revised design. As I mentioned earlier, the facility were located at the northeast portion of the building, has now been relocated to the sort of the central part of it. And obviously with the reduction of the a lot of the concrete access with pavement, we're now shortening a lot of this laneway access by combining a lot of the operation and maneuvering of the service vehicle within the central part, the part of the site. And again, this is going to be a full access onto Leslie Street, which will accommodate all the traffic needs as proposed by this development. From a landscape perspective, I know it's going to be a little bit difficult to see on the original proposal, which only represented by a black and white plan. But essentially, we're trying to maintain the consistent approach between the original and the revised scheme, where we're trying to provide and create a passive recreational opportunities to a larger greenland system just north of us. A lot of these trees planting within and near the buffer area, a lot of them are existing trees that are currently on the property. Through our tree inventory and preservation report, we are proposing to retain and protect those trees, and it will be integrated as part of our replanting along these buffer along the northern edge and the southern edge, as well as the western edge of the proposed development. At this point, we are still working through the landscaping program and the amenity programming. Certainly, we have contemplated a green roof on this particular development as well. And as we go forward through the development application process, we will be working through on and determining a lot more of those programming details as it becomes available through the detailed design stage. This is the figure demonstrating the 45-degree angular plane. Although there isn't any 45-degree angular plane policy in the Aurora 2C secondary plan nor the Aurora 2C urban design guideline, but we felt strongly that in keeping with the 45-degree angular plane approach is a good design principle. And so we have done that with this development by demonstrating a 45-degree angular plane from the Leslie Street frontage and also to the west to the nearest residential homes on Conklin Crescent, west of the subject property. As you can see, there's a separation from the residential lot to the physical building, the physical proposed building, a distance of about 108 meters. That is the equivalent of roughly 360 feet building separation, with environmental features such as the pond that you've seen on the previous slide, and also along the western edges of some of the mature vegetation along the western edge of the property. Again, this is another 45 angular plane demonstration from the Leslie Street frontage. Part of the angular plane guiding principle, obviously, is to address any of the shadowing issue onto the surrounding proximity lands. And we have also conducted a shadow study, which has been submitted as part of the application. I know this is a little confusing to see, but you can just focus on the purple color, which is essentially a representation of the shadow on the ground from the building. This is time between March and September. As you can see, there's barely any shadowing issue onto the neighboring lands. The lands north of us is part of the original Greenland system, so it's not intended to be developed. Same thing during June. With the high elevation of the sun, you can see the purple barely creating any shadow impact on the adjacent lands. Certainly during December, where we have a longer shadow, there is a bit of shadow touching barely at the periphery of the senior home project north of us. And as you can see in this demonstration, there is not much of a shadowing impact onto the low-rise residential subdivision to the west. Here's a few elevations rendering, just demonstrating the proposed development. This is looking north from the site on the south boundary. This is another perspective looking northwest. This is looking west from Leslie Street. And this is pretty much at grade level looking into the building on the northwest direction. So with that, I'd like to conclude my presentation by saying thank you, staff, for advancing this application in this challenging time. I know it's very difficult for all of us to try to work remotely, so I truly appreciate the time and effort through this application process. I truly believe there is a real good opportunity for this particular property as it's situated at this particular location that present a very unique enclave type of environment for this type of project, and I truly believe there is an opportunity to be able to achieve and able to finish this section of Leslie Street corridor with an exciting skyline and a different product type from the rest of the community. And obviously, as a professional planner, I understand that the height and density is certainly one of the benchmark in evaluating the volume project as such of this nature, but it should not be the only benchmark. We should also be looking into the surrounding context from environmental, urban design, and architectural perspective. And I certainly believe this is a project that is consistent and compatible with the surrounding context. So with that, I would conclude my presentation, and happy to answer and address any questions or comments that you might have. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Wong. Just ask you to hold tight while we get the presentation from staff.
Good evening. Good evening, everybody. Welcome to the statutory public planning meeting for official plan and zoning bylaw amendment applications OPA-2020-03 and ZBA-2020-03. I'm Sean LaPena with the town's planning department, and I'll be providing an overview of the subject applications, comments raised to date, as well as next steps. Can everybody hear me okay? Yeah. I'd also like to note that the applicant has recently made a resubmission, which now includes changes to the proposal, which weren't reflected in the staff report. Changes have been made as it relates to the proposed density, parking, and lot coverage. I will speak to these changes throughout my presentation. The subject lands are located on the west side of Leslie Street, north of Holiday Drive, south of St. John Side Road, west of Highway 404, and are municipally recognized as 15516 Leslie Street. The subject lands are designated as Urban Residential 2 and Environmental Protection Area under the Aurora 2C Secondary Plan, OPA 73. The Urban Residential 2 designation permits medium-density housing forms that are well-designed and transit-supportive in proximity to community recreational and convenience commercial facilities. The Environmental Protection Area designation protects and enhances the natural heritage system. This designation contains hazard lands, natural heritage features, including their associated buffer areas, vegetative protective zones, and/or setbacks. Section 3.3.2E of OPA 73 states that the maximum density of any building within the Urban Residential 2 designation shall be 6 stories, or 20 meters, whichever is less. Section 3.3.2F of OPA 73 states that the density within the urban residential 2 designation shall range from between 35 and 50 units per net residential hectare, where proposed small-scale, low-rise apartment developments and/or stacked back-to-back townhouses shall have a maximum density of 125 units per net residential hectare. The subject lands are currently zoned rural, RU, under the town's zoning bylaw. Uses permitted in the rural zone include agricultural uses, detached dwellings, second suites, greenhouses, home occupations, and places of worship. The applicant has submitted official plan and zoning bylaw amendment applications to accommodate a 7-story condominium apartment building with a total of 137 units, 197 underground parking spaces, private driveway, and open space lands. The previous submission proposed 201 parking spaces, and the latest submission, as mentioned, proposes 197 parking spaces. The previous submission also proposed a building lot coverage of 48%, while the latest submission proposes 39%. The official plan amendment proposes to introduce site-specific policies to permit increased height and density. The zoning bylaw amendment proposes to rezone the subject lands from the rural zone to second density residential apartment, residential exception zone, and environmental protection zone. A related site plan application has been submitted, and here you'll see the applicant's latest site plan, which reflects the proposed building configuration. The condominium apartment building would have a total gross floor area of 10,715.2 square meters, which is 115,337 square feet. The building will include 26 one-bedroom units, 70 one-bedroom units, 1 bedroom plus 10 units, 14 two-bedroom units, and 27 two-bedroom plus 10 units. The owner is proposing the following site-specific policies for the lands designated urban residential 2, as shown in the highlighted area on the screen. A maximum density of 265 units per net hectare, where net hectare is measured by only excluding the natural feature limit and includes environmental buffers, and a maximum height of 7 stories or 26 meters, measured from the average grade at the front property line and excluding the mechanical penthouse. The previous submission reflected a maximum density of 260 units per net hectare. To accommodate the development of the site, the owner is proposing to rezone the subject lands from rural to second density apartment residential exception zone and environmental protection zone. Site-specific standards have been requested, which are currently being reviewed by staff. The proposed applications will be reviewed for consistency with the following provincial, regional, and municipal policies: the provincial policy statement, the growth plan for the Greater Golden Horseshoe, the Lake Simcoe Protection Plan, the York Region Official Plan, the town's official plan, and the town's zoning bylaw. A first submission has been circulated and reviewed. The following are matters to be addressed: proposed increase in height in density above existing official plan permissions will require further discussion on community benefits. Additional information has been requested to assess potential impacts to the wetland, forest edge, and watershed. Regional approval of the submitted transportation study is required. An adequate justification must be provided to support the proposed parking deficiency. York Region has confirmed that they are the approval authority for the official plan amendment, as a portion of the site is located within the regional Greenland system, and buffers are required to protect existing natural features. Public planning staff have received comments from the public. A summary of the comments received to date are as follows: concern in regards to safety and privacy, concern regarding noise caused by construction, effects on sunlight to neighboring properties, effects on property values, concern with increased height and density, concern with impact on nature and wildlife, concern with impact on existing servicing infrastructure. For next steps, staff will undertake a review of the subject applications, addressing the outlined matters, as well as any comments received from the public and council raised at the public planning meeting. A comprehensive report with staff recommendations will be presented for consideration and direction at a future general committee meeting. That concludes my presentation. The planning staff as well as the applicant are available for any questions that anybody may have. Thank you.
Thank you. I will now ask if there's any members of the public. And before I do that, I'd just like to remind everyone, York Region, including the town of Aurora, has a mandatory mask policy. Those that have their own mic, if you notice, our staff member kept his mask on, so just to let everyone know, because it's a communal mic, we are asking that you keep your mask on. We have individual mics, so when we speak, we can take it off, but at all times, we're expected to be wearing our masks unless you are exempted as per the policy. Okay? Are there any members of the public that would like to come forward? I know I do have some on Zoom. Is that correct, Mr. Clark? Are there for the next application? Okay. Is there anyone? Yep. Come forward. If I can get you to state your name, your address, and you have 5 minutes, ma'am.
Okay, so first time here, sorry.
Yes.
Pretty nervous. My name is Lu Han, and I live in 216 Conklin Crescent, which is the neighborhood just right behind that, the project. Okay, and good evening, Mr. Mayor and the city councilors. And I represent the hundreds of residents from my neighborhood, and they are watching me and from the camera here. So we strongly against the change of zoning bylaws, which is turning a rural zone into a second density residential condo. And here are our reasons. So the first thing is school space. I just heard they talk about the schools. There is some schools there, but what is reality? In the fact, there are over 1,000 houses on Leslie from Wellington to St. John's, but no public schools at all. And in the past 5 years, no kid is allowed to go to their home school, which is supposed to be the Hartman or Rick Hansen. Instead, most of kids have to go across Wellington Street to Aurora Grove, or some of them have to go to Davis Drive, which is located at the most west side of Aurora. And they need to take 45 minutes on the school bus, just because this is the first station and keep from the east side to west side. And how can you add another 137 families here and let all the kids no school to go? And I had talked to York Region School Board, and they also agree our area is the most overflow school area in the whole York region, include everywhere, the Markham, Richmond Hill. We are the worst one right now. And the second is the community center and the community park. Do you know how busy is the community center on the Leslie Street before the pandemic is? You need to wait for 10 minutes just for a parking spot. And all the residents have to fight for a spot for the programs for their kids online. And if you add another 137 families, how can the kids have chance to involve the community activities? This is no fair. This is very unfair for our existing kids here. And do you know how small and how busy is our community park in the neighborhood? Since we have a very small neighborhood, that's why the builder just make a tiny park. It's already packed. Even in this pandemic time, it's already packed. So just come over to check it. The condos, if you build there, so just squeeze the space for our kids. And the third part is the traffic problem. The project site is very close to two intersections, which is the Holidays and the William Graham. It's just right in the middle. And the local traffic is already very bad every morning with lots of school buses and the people who need to go to work and go access to the 404, right? And how can you just add another hundreds or more cars into this bad traffic? It will make it become a very dangerous street for the local residents, especially for our community. We have only one exit. We cannot avoid. We cannot say we go other way. We have to go exit to this onto the Leslie and to meet the traffic there. So I just believe anyone who agrees to this project, can you just take responsible on the car accident for the future? So the fourth one is the nature light. In our neighborhood and also the neighborhood beside us, so we have lots of seniors and the kids. It's still broken in the sense. I saw that the lining, the studies, Yeah, this study was the builder make, not we make. We don't believe that because we can see the building is covered in sun there. And who can guarantee the seniors and the kids and their health is not affected by lack of enough air and vitamin D from the sun? And the next one is I'm talking about the zoning. So on the Aurora zoning official plan, this site is zoning rule. So we don't understand why government and the builders not focus on the land, which is already zoned residential or commercial, and have to turn to a raw land into a residence. So it's also harmful to the animals. Our neighborhood, we see the deers, beavers, turkeys all the times. So we are already contact the environmental defense and animal protection organizations. And next one is the best interest. Just wish everyone here, you are the city councilors, and no matter there's ward or not, you represent Aurora. So we hope you shall protect the best interest of residents of Aurora, not the builder. And right now we have a petition. In this moment, we have over 240 signatures and it's 90% residents of neighborhoods. So it's just started in last 2 days. If you give us more time, it's easier to go over thousands and thousands signature on the petition. This is what our best interest is for our Auroranian. So we will keep fight for this and protect our community, our home. Thank you, everyone.
Thank you.
With the signature, we already emailed to everyone
Yes.
here. Thank you.
Thank you. Is there any other members of the public that would like to come up and speak? Seeing none? And there's no Zoom on for this one? Mr. Waters? Mr. Waters, did you get some of those questions?
Certainly, Mr. Mayor. I'll start with the initial comment made about the rural zone. It's important to note that this site does have development rights that have been assigned by the secondary plan that was implemented by OPA 73, which is urban residential, so it does have development rights. The zoning was never updated to reflect what was in the secondary plan. In terms of no school capacity in the area, the application has been circulated to the school boards, and we are awaiting comments from them. In terms of the community park capacity, I believe she's referring to the park that's in 2C. And I really can't comment on that, but I can advise that I believe this condo building will have its amenities provided on site. In terms of traffic, it's important to note that Leslie Street is an arterial road. It is under the jurisdiction of the region. I believe they are okay with the full turning movements that is being proposed. And in terms of wildlife, the building envelope has essentially been developed or been identified to date. They're not encroaching into the environmental protection area. And secondly, they will have the appropriate buffers implemented, which is the major reason why the region has decided to maintain the approval authority for the official plan amendment.
Thank you. And I'll just add an answer to the school one. Just last month, Minister Lecce was in town, and we have an approval. There will be a new school at the Hartwell and William Graham. There will be a new public school there being built, and from their target timelines, it should be completed by 2024. So I just wanted to update you just in case you haven't heard that yet. I'll have to ask you to come back up. So is there any other members of the public that wanted to come up? I'll ask her. Otherwise, if someone wanted to come up for a second time. No? Okay, well, I'll close the public portion of this meeting. And Council, I will turn to you and ask if you have any questions for the applicant. Right now, we're just doing questions to the applicant, not to the report itself. Councillor Kim.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. Through you, Mr. Mayor, can the applicant describe how much landscape or buffer exists between the boundary of 216 Conklin and the stormwater drainage pond. The reason for the question is I'm wondering whether there is space for a landscape program to go onto that buffer area, such as some tree samplings to help with the sightlines.
Mr. Wong?
Through you, Mr. Chair. To Councillor Kim, certainly, if I may share my screen. So what you're looking at here is a Google Earth image of the subject site to the residential subdivision to the west. As you can see, the pond occupied the western portion of the property, and there are some mature vegetation has been assessed for a very long time, and part of the proposed development is that all these features will be protected and preserved, and we're not encroaching into any of these limits. So we have done a full environmental impact assessment on these features and has been submitted to the town and the region for review. We certainly propose some of the restoration, replanting along the buffer edges, but because the state of these features has been more or less been naturalized for more than a couple of decades, so I think what we're proposing is to leave these features as in the natural state as much as possible without any disturbance to it. But certainly there is opportunity for us to look at that western edge and the interface to the subdivision to the west in terms of any additional plantation or landscaping that could be done at that particular location.
Councillor Kim?
Thank you. And to follow up on that, the applicant revealed a slide which revealed the incline of the sight line from Conklin to Leslie with a 45-degree angle. So with the mature trees there, now I have ran across that neighborhood before, but I can't recall exactly how tall the trees were. Currently, would it be fair to say that during spring, summer, fall, that perhaps some or all of the conceptual building would be covered, or would that be would still be in visual?
Mr. Wong?
Through you, Mr. Chair, if I may once again share my screen. So I had the opportunity to take a sidewalk over the weekend along Conklin Crescent relative to the interface of our subject lands. And the question about the vegetation currently exists today, this is the picture actually taken at the street level on Conklin Crescent looking north. And I believe this is the subject property, which is the closest one to the subject proposed development. As you can see, these trees are fairly mature, and the heights are pretty much taller than the existing homes along Conklin Crescent. This is a better perspective, again, on Conklin Crescent looking east to the Leslie Street corridor. There is ample of mature vegetation currently exists along this area, which in turn providing some level of screening between the existing subdivision to the proposed development. And I'd like to reiterate that there are a distance separation between their side yard to the building of about 108 meters. And just to put that into perspective, that is equivalent of more than a typical soccer field in today's standard.
Councillor Kim?
Great. Thank you very much.
Thank you. Councillor Gilliland, questions for the applicant?
Thank you, through you, Mr. Mayor, to Mr. Wong. I have a couple questions. I noticed that you increased your parking from the original report from 191 to 197. If my math is correct, it's about a 1.4 to 1.5 ratio, and I'm just wondering if is there a percentage in there included for visitor parking, and what's your solution on that deficit, if there is none?
Mr. Wong?
Through you, Mr. Chair,
There is a deficiency of 15 parking spaces in terms of the parking requirement. Based on the bylaw, we're required to provide 212 total of parking spaces, both for the residents and the visitor parking. And we're now able to provide 197 as in the latest with submission as a result of the 15 parking spaces deficiency. In terms of a solution to that, I think what we had tried to do is conducting a proxy surveys in the area with a similar type of development when we got those comments from the region as well as municipal staff. Unfortunately, during the pandemic period, we were not able to obtain any response from those condominiums. We are continuing to reach out to them and hopefully able to conduct a proxy survey in order to demonstrate there is no traffic or parking issue based on the 15 spaces deficiency. But at this point, I think our traffic consultant, who's also in attendance tonight, can speak to the technical the matter. It's demonstrated in the report based on all the data and the traffic analysis that the 15 spaces will not be an issue based on the car ownership in the area within the municipal boundary.
Councillor?
Thank you. I'd be interested in hearing more about the analysis on the lack of the 15, based on the fact that the transportation vehicles and access isn't really up to 100%. Leslie Street is still under a lot of construction. So is there some sort of future plan with transportation that region is providing that maybe perhaps I don't know about that's going to compensate for the lack of 15 parking spaces? Do we have some transportation that's being provided that through your traffic analysis that's providing this kind of data that you speak of?
Mr. Wong?
Mr. Chair, and I'd just like to add a couple points before our traffic consultant get into the technical aspect of it. The Leslie Street corridor definitely has finished the construction work and the widening work just recently with the installation of bike lanes on both sides. I had the opportunity to drove by the site, and the work has been done between St. John's Road and Wellington Street. Leslie Street certainly also within the region TMP is designated a transit priority network for the year 2041, and it's definitely a corridor which envisioned higher order transit to be serviced and available from your region transit perspective. With the development of this nature, obviously we'll be able to provide the opportunity and add on to maximizing the transit ridership along this area for people who live and work in the area and also commuting to other municipalities around the GTA.
Councillor?
Sorry, Nava, if you have anything to add from a technical perspective, please chime in.
Sure. Hi, everyone. Just to speak a little bit on in terms of pure numbers. So the development meets the visitor parking supply, bicycle parking supply, and accessible parking supply. So we're talking in terms of proportion. So we're talking about a deficiency mainly for residents. And as part of this study, we've run a review of vehicle ownership in Aurora using TTS data, which yielded an average of 1.06 spaces per unit, which is exceeded by our proposed residential spaces, which is equivalent to a rate of approximately 1.16. So we're about 0.1 spaces per unit in excess of what was surveyed in the town. And as Mr. Wong spoke, considering we're exceeding bicycle parking requirements and meeting the rest, one strong emphasis of the, apart from residential with a small deficiency, one strong emphasis for this development is to promote a lot of transportation demand management initiatives like Presto passes, to use the future transit corridor improvements, as well as the excess bicycle parking, to use the bike lanes, and various information packages and things of the sort to really promote the use of non-vehicle for travel, which is ultimately the goal for your region. So in addition to the TTS data for vehicle ownership, we believe that somewhat not justifies, but eases the very minor deficiency of the site. And as Mr. Wong said, we have reached to a total of 5 developments that we talked to the city about, or the town, excuse me, for surveys, but as you're all aware, with COVID, no one wants to even be with their neighbors, so strangers are not welcome in any developments, so unfortunately we can get access then. Thank you.
Thank you. Councillor?
Thank you. I had a hard time hearing some of that, but from what I gathered, correct me if you're wrong, you did some sort of survey in town to kind of understand the need or desire for the amount of parking, and you came up with a number of 1.06. I don't really know where this data came from. It wasn't clear to me. And Mr. Wong spoke of transportation being satisfied as far as the services, comparing it to 2041. So are we basing kind of projection of how much transportation is going to be available to subsequent the lack of parking based on what kind of services are going to be available by 2041, or am I mishearing that?
Mr. Wong? Oh, yep, sure.
So the 1.06 spaces we referred to, that's based on the transportation to more survey data, which is a survey that's done every year in the GTA, and that is sent to households to get various types of information like origin, destination, number of vehicles in the household, number of drivers in the household, where do people live, and it's broken down for zones. And for the town of Aurora, the survey shows that the vehicle ownership for apartment buildings such as the one that's proposed is 1.06 per unit. So based on the survey of the town and the actual vehicle ownership of the people in the town, the proposed residential spaces would exceed that survey data. It shows a slight deficiency compared to the bylaw requirements, but would exceed the survey data. And with regards to your second question, it's not about the 2041 improvements. It's more about trying to promote a mode of travel that's less dependent on auto use. So it's used a lot in Markham, Toronto, and other municipalities in the GTA, Richmond Hill, etc., where it's TDM measures like the region comes and subsidizes Presto passes for the future residents. So it allows a future resident of the development to have a bus pass for the month. I believe it's a month, and allows them to test their commute by bus because it's free, and in the hopes that they try to not use their car as much. So it would be that, it would be pamphlet because there's a lot of trails and a lot of greenery around. We're trying to get people to be less dependent on vehicles, and the excess of bicycle parking is also an encouragement for people to potentially use their bikes to commute in the summer, and all that is trying to feed into justifying that slight deficiency. I hope you could hear me correctly. I think that mic is active.
Councillor?
Thank you. I'll leave the rest of my questions in regards to that to staff. And this is a question probably for Mr. Wong. There's some comments here about additional information requested in order to comply, assess potential impacts to wetland, forest, deep forest edge, and watershed. And I was wondering, Mr. Wong, if you could kind of embellish on what kind of preparations you have in place in order to satisfy some of that request, as well as the sanitary sewer analysis, if you have something that you can kind of comment on what we should expect moving forward.
Mr. Wong?
Through you, Mr. Chair, we have complete all the technical portions of the study that was identified in the consultation meeting that we had a year ago. Part of those technical studies do involve environmental impact assessment, technical hydrology, which understand and evaluate the soil conditions and the underground waters, specifically to the land conditions on the subject site, and obviously to all the environmental features that has been identified on the site. So those technical studies has been submitted to the town and the region for review. In terms of the surfacing scheme, understanding that Leslie Street had just recently completed all the construction work,
So the region would not allow us to rip open the Leslie Street corridor for obvious reason, given the recent construction work completed. So the servicing scheme as of today, the proposal in our servicing scheme is we'll be proposing a trenchless design which have the servicing available, both the water main and the sanitary sewer along the Leslie Street corridor. And it will be connecting through our site underneath Leslie Street without any disruption on the road service, and then come back onto Holiday Drive, which leads to the subdivisions located southwest of us, and ultimately going further west to a pump station. And in terms of stormwater, it's going to be quantitatively and qualitatively controlled on site. And the pond, as we have identified on this property, it will be used as a, I call it sort of a clean water feature that will contain all the stormwater flow within the site. So all the storm will be treated and controlled and drained into this feature.
Councillor?
Thank you. And so with that comment, are you saying that the stormwater pond that's there has already been identified that it can handle the construction of the building that you're presenting today, or is that still need work?
Mr. Wong?
Through you, Mr. Chair, the pond itself, it has been identified in terms of a condition in the technical report. I would expect there will be some level of improvement works to the pond in order to allow the construction and the ongoing long-term drainage in terms of storm conveyance to be able to maintain going forward. And yes, the pond will be improved to a point where it will be able to handle the construction as well as the ultimate build-up of the proposed project. And obviously, the underground water table, as per our analysis, we identify water table in between 7 to 9.8 meters, I believe. So in terms of any underground structure, that will not be an issue. And during construction, I believe there will be temporary dewatering, which making sure that the pre and post condition will be maintained, pre, during construction, and after construction.
Councillor?
Thank you. Final question here. You were talking a lot about schools and amenities and things being as part of being, I guess, a trail system being connected to this community, and you made reference to the neighborhood of Conklin Crescent. Is there an intention to be connecting a trail system from your building to that community?
Mr. Wong?
Through you, Mr. Chair, if I may just share my screen so that we can bring up the context. So this is just a generalization of the land uses in the area. We're certainly looking to convey the pond features and a portion of the woodland located at the north portion of our property. Once again, we're not proposing any removal or encroachment onto these features. And to the question about trails, that is correct. Based on the current active transportation schedule, there is the east-west trail connection that's been identified just north of our site through this regional Greenland system, as you can see in my cursor, that leads on to the other side of Leslie Street. So by way of conveying our woodland, a portion of the woodland, which would help and assist delivering that trail system through this Greenland regional system overall. In terms of any connection to the subdivision, I think any trail system connection will be through this sort of green area. At this point, certainly we're not proposing any pedestrian or vehicular connections because everything will be contained within the site through our access off Leslie Street. But by virtue of conveying the woodland, obviously that would assist in the region to achieve that trail connection, which will happen in the near future.
Councillor?
Thank you, through you, Mr. Mayor. And just one last comment. And you may not have an answer from you right now, but you do have in the report here, it says a future staff report to council will outline proposed community benefits. Obviously, you're looking for a little bit more height, so I thought perhaps maybe you had something that you would like to share with council now while you have our attention on that community benefit.
Mr. Wong?
Through you, Mr. Chair, and thank you for raising that. With the added height and density, we're certainly looking to have further dialogue and conversation with staff in the town on Section 37 contribution. We haven't landed on any details at this point, just given where we are in the process, but I am very much looking forward to have that conversation moving forward. Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor.
Thank you. That's all for now. And I just wanted to put out there, I know that Councillor Gartner's on Zoom. And,
I'm getting to her next. Thank you,
Thank you.
Councillor. Councillor Gartner, and then Councillor Gallo. Councillor Gartner, go ahead.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. I'm preparing for surgery, so I'm self-isolating. Thank you for allowing me to do video. To Mr. Wong, with respect to the height, it says in our report that it's 26 meters. Could you tell me, I believe somebody said that the height of the proposed building is 20.3. Are you expecting the mechanical penthouse to be 3?
Mr. Wong?
Through you, Mr. Chair, to Councillor Gartner, just a point of clarification, the proposed height of the building is actually 23.5 meters. The current zoning destination that we're seeking and rezoning to, which is the RA2 zone, in the parent zoning bylaw, it would allow up to 26 meters. But our actual building proposed at this point from the Leslie Street frontage is at 23.5 meters. So just a point of clarification on that.
So, and I guess, and I'll just chime in, Mr. Wong, does that include the mechanical up on the top?
Through you, Mr. Chair, no, that is not including the mechanical penthouse. As per the zoning definition, I think the height is measuring from the average grade to the top of the building, which excludes the mechanical component on top of the building.
And do you have, and I guess what Councillor Gartner is asking, I'll let her go back to her, but do you have a specific height on that mechanical part of it? Like how much?
Through you, Mr. Chair, I believe I do. I'm just going to pull up my elevations. Give me a second. Apology, my okay, okay, sorry. Or just bear with me 1 second.
Sure.
Okay, here we are, and I'm going to share my screen. Can we all see the screen?
Yep.
Yes.
So I'm just going to go down to the elevation, which I will be able to show you the height of the mechanical penthouse. Our project architect's also in attendance today, so if I have missed anything, Sal, please feel free to chime in. So at the top of the building here, it's 307.53 with the additional of the mechanical roof. That will get us up to 313.03. So if I do the math just quickly, that will be a difference of about 6 meters.
If I may, so are you saying it's 23.5 plus 6 meters?
Through you, Mr. Chair, that is correct.
Councillor?
Thank you. Thank you. Thank you, Mr. Mayor, for helping me with that one.
No, you're welcome. Yeah, anything else, Councillor?
Oh, yes, I do.
Okay.
Could you kindly go over the parking again? I, at 1.5, required for the R2 zone. I get a different number than you. Could you tell me again what your figures are for residential parking?
Mr. Wong?
Through you, Mr. Chair, if I may defer this to our traffic consultant. He can speak to the numbers of the parking requirements.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Wong. Through you, Mr. Chair. The way this was calculated, I don't mind, I'll share my screen. What do you think of it? So the way this was calculated is using the 1.5 rate to apply to the 137. That's about 206 parking spaces. And then in addition to that, we applied the accessible parking rate requirement of 2 plus 2%, which is equal to 6 accessible parking spaces for a total of 212.
Thank you. I'll clarify with staff, but my understanding from the bylaw is that for visitors, you have to provide, in the 1.5 standard, you have to have 20% of the required residential spots,
Yes. Yes.
which would be 41.
Exactly. Yeah. So it's the 41 that you see. So there's two columns. There's the required parking space and the provided. The 41 that you see here is the required parking spaces for the bylaw, which is 20% of the total. And as part of the development, there's a total of 38 visitor parking spaces that are proposed, which meets the 20% requirements based on the total parking spaces proposed.
Council?
Thank you. The numbers are a little bit different than in the report. I suppose you've changed this since the report was written. Thank you. Back to you, Mr. Wong, if you wouldn't mind. When you're talking about the pond, that pond is not at the moment a stormwater management pond, from what I know. This was a pond built by the former residents.
Mr. Wong?
Through you, Mr. Chair, to Councillor Gardner, that is correct. As far as my knowledge on this particular site, the pond is a man-made pond that was created by the previous owner going years ago. And over time, this pond is sort of on its natural state turned into somewhat of a wetland feature, which hence why through our environmental work, we have identified that as such and be protected and preserved on site. But given the pond itself, I think there is an option and a solution for us to utilize that as a conveyance of stormwater, as I alluded to earlier, and something our environmental consultant can speak to that a little further from a technical perspective. But as far as I understand, this pond will be used as a storm conveyance, both quantitatively and qualitatively.
Thank you. I must disagree with you. This is a wetland feature and it's not meant to be a stormwater feature. And according to a very extensive study that Mr. Tomlinson did, we don't want wildlife around stormwater management ponds because they're not really healthy for them. So I wouldn't like to see this turned into a stormwater management pond. You mentioned dewatering. Where are you dewatering? What are you dewatering?
Mr. Wong?
Through you, Mr. Chair, unfortunately, our servicing engineer was not available for tonight, but in my recollections, within our functional servicing report, there was a identification of dewatering that will require during construction, given the water table that we're dealing with.
Right.
So make sure that the underground water is being managed pre and during construction, and certainly post-construction in terms of maintaining that water table. So technical details that have been identified in the report, and unfortunately our servicing consultants not here with us tonight, but that's what I've known from the servicing scheme being proposed as part of the development.
Councillor?
Thank you, and perhaps you can, through Mr. Mayor, perhaps you can follow this up with our planning staff, because I would be shocked and extremely upset if the dewatering affected the pond that is the wetland feature. So could you please find that out and give this information to our staff?
We'll make sure that gets done, Councillor.
Thank you. Your slide on the shadowing, if you could bring that back up.
Go ahead, Councillor.
So if I'm seeing correctly, it looks to me like there is continuous shadowing on the pond from this particular slide.
Through Mr. Chair, the color of the shadow on the ground, it should be the purple color. Based on this time of the year, during March and September, our shadow study tells us that the shadowing is actually away from the pond.
Great. Thank you. Thank you very much. Guess the last question is, we did mention bonusing. We always are looking for affordable housing, but we do have in our OP the 25% provision. It says all new residential developments meet the definition of affordable housing and provide 20% of housing meeting that definition of affordable. I don't believe you've discussed that with our planners as yet.
Mr. Wong?
Through you, Mr. Chair, we have not had a discussion on Section 37 contribution just yet, as I have mentioned earlier, given the where we are in terms of the process. But I certainly look forward to have that conversation with staff and identify any Section 37 contribution in terms of the details of it, either through rental units or public art, whichever form might be. Happy to have the discussion.
I'm not talking about the Planning Act provision, Section 37. I'm talking about our official plan with respect to affordable housing provision. Perhaps you can further that with staff. And sorry, Mr. Mayor, I was wrong. That's not my last question, but this is. With respect to the amenity area, how much of a decrease in indoor amenity area are you providing for a social room? I'm not talking about balconies, but a social room that the residents can enjoy.
Mr. Wong?
Through you, Mr. Chair, if I may defer that question to our project architect.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you, Jack. And through you, Mr. Chair. Jack, do you have a copy of the ground floor amenity plan? You can put it up on the screen.
Certainly.
Maybe we can identify all of the amenities on the drawings. I think the largest one is in the northeast corner, Jack, if you can there. That area is probably is far large enough for a gathering for the entire building, for party room, meeting room, social room. It's the equivalent of about 1,200 square feet there. There's bicycle storage in front, and this leads out to a green belt as well, or the green belt as well. So it's a very suitable area, quiet for meetings and parties. It's also under an area of the building that won't affect very many people. There are some other areas, Jack, on the roof, up on the top, right? If you can flip to the other plans. And I think there's one down below. So in total, I think we have more than enough amenity for a building of this nature, because it's actually a combination of the indoor-outdoor amenity that's required.
Counselor?
Thank you. Thank you. Through Mr. Mayor, well, we can discuss, I can ask staff this, but our bylaw is very specific about the amenity area, and it says that half has to be, it's very specific as to what's required, and half has to be indoors and half has to be outdoors. But I can further that with staff. Thank you.
Thank you, Counselor. Is that all?
Yes, thank you.
Thank you. Counselor Gallo, questions to the applicant?
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. Just along the same lines, the amenity space, the requirement is 18 meters squared per unit, 137 units, 2466 meters squared. Is that accurate? And if so, I saw 1,200 square feet in some other space, but can you identify exactly what the square footage is that you're proposing?
Mr. Wong?
Of indoor space?
So, Chair, I will pull up my screen here once again. And Sal, please chime in. If I have missed anything, I'm just gonna go to the statistics table here as part of our submission. We are providing a total of 3621 meters square in terms of outdoor amenity, and we are short on the indoor amenity requirement based on the zoning at this point of 472 meters square.
Counselor?
So it was 2,400 square meters of indoor-outdoor space, the requirement 12, I guess 50-50, 1224 and 1224. Is your proposed 3,621 square meters of outdoor space including the balconies?
Mr. Wong?
Thank you, Mr. Chair. That's correct. It does include the balcony, and overall, in terms of amenity requirement, we are meeting the 18 meters square per unit based on the zoning standard.
So if do you have the calculation removing the balconies, and actually how much square footage of outdoor space on the ground floor there would be?
Mr. Wong?
Through Mr. Chair, I don't think I have that statistic in front of me here, but that's something definitely we can take it back to our architect and provide you with that statistics number.
Okay, do you have on the map, at least we can visualize what the outdoor space looks like?
Mr. Wong?
So if I may defer this to you in terms of the architectural package. Sal, can you hear?
Apologize for that. I'm just trying to calculate how much roughly it would be if I could just have 1 minute.
Could we actually see it on the map as well through you, Mr. Mayor?
So if, Jack, if you have a landscape plan, I guess.
That's exactly what I'm trying to put up here. So this is the color version of our proposed landscape plan. So on the green, we have identified on this landscape plan essentially account for those outdoor amenity that we have shown in the architectural package.
Sorry, I didn't follow that comment.
He said, Councillor, I believe, and Mr. Wong, you can correct me if I'm wrong, that all the landscaping, so all the green is part of the outdoor amenity.
Through Mr. Chair, that is correct.
So landscaping is part of outdoor amenity, okay?
Through Mr. Chair, and there's also a courtyard and planting and other sort of passive recreational spaces that we are providing throughout the site.
Councillor?
Okay. As far as the regional municipality of York, I know you had requested an exemption from their approval, and it was denied because the region suggests or says that there's a significant portion of the site is designated regional green land space with significant wetland and water course on site, and therefore cannot be exempt from the regional approval. It says that the region will need to ensure that the proposed development is located outside the 10-meter woodland buffer, the 15-meter wetland buffer, and the 30-meter water course buffer. Does your application fit within that?
Mr. Wong?
Through you, Mr. Chair, the regional exemption request that was denied is there's a bit of a timing issue there as well. And as the latest update on that, the region issued that letter response prior to the conversation and meeting that our environmental consultant had with the Lake Simcoe Conservation Authority. The latest on that is that the region would like to help hold on to the original approval because they want to make sure that the conservation is agreed upon in terms of the environmental features limit and the associated buffer that we're providing on the site. So since that letter has been issued to us, we were able to reach a consensus with the conservation, and our environmental consultant, Ian Rowe, will be able to speak to that in a little bit more details. But essentially, the region just wanted to defer that decision by holding that approval authority essentially until the conservation has been satisfied with the environmental buffers requirement, which at this point I'm happy to report that we have reached that consensus with the conservation already.
Councillor?
Does your application comply with the 10-meter woodland buffer, the 15-meter wetland buffer, and the 30-meter water course buffer that the region mandates?
Mr. Wong?
Through you, Mr. Chair, if I may defer this to our environmental consultant, Ian Rowe.
Hello. Through you, Mr. Chair, the application has a 15-meter wetland buffer. The buffer to the woodland varies. So there's a 6-meter development limit buffer, which has no grading beyond the 6 meters. The setback for the building varies beyond that. And in conversation with the LSRCA, there was a general agreement that given the existing conditions being a manicured lawn, the restoration of the buffer and the space between the building and the woodland, that the overall the buffer would average out to, between the building and the woodland would average out to approximately 10 meters, that the 6-meter no grading zone, which is shown as a development limit here, sufficiently protects the root zones of the feature, and that the restoration provides sufficient compensation. But it's not a straight 10-meter buffer, so there is some nuance to it that was discussed with the LSRCA.
Councillor?
So it does comply with those three elements: the 10-meter water, generally woodland buffer, 15-meter wetland buffer, and 30-meter water course buffer?
Mr. Rowe?
Yes. So it complies with the 15-meter wetland buffer completely. The water course buffer is well past 30 meters, and the woodland buffer is generally 10 meters. So there is some give and take where it's slightly larger in some areas and slightly smaller in others. The minimum point between the building and the stake drip line is 8.7 meters, and it extends out beyond 12 or 15 meters.
Okay.
Councillor?
The requirements are, as you know, I think it's 6 stories, 20 meters. You're proposing 7 stories, 26 meters. Does the westerly facade have 8 stories?
Mr. Wong?
Through you, Mr. Chair, I'm going to put up our elevations. And to answer that question, that is essentially will be the condition of our western portion of the building, given the site is sloping significantly as we go west in terms of the topography. So I'm just trying to bring up an elevations here. So on the west portion of the building, you will be seeing a 8-story conditions, given the grading, which slopes significantly downwards as we go west.
So it's 8 stories, almost 1/3 of the building. What is that overall height?
Mr. Wong?
Through you, Mr. Chair, let me go back to my notes here. The west portion height, based on this topography, will be at 27.5 meters, measuring from the finished grade to the top of the building, excluding the mechanical penthouse.
Counselor?
So about 30 with the mechanical penthouse and 8 stories. So I'm just curious that the proposal says 7 stories and 26 meters, but 1/3 of the building is 8 stories and 27 meters.
Through you, Mr. Chair, when we're measuring height from the Leslie Street frontage, it is a 7-story building, and again, given the topography with the slope going down as we go west on the property, this is essentially will be the interface, and yes, it will look like a next story from that perspective. But once again, given the separations from the western portion of the building with the buffer and the pond, and the distance between this to the subdivision to the west, there is a very generous separation in terms of building separation in that type of conditions.
Counselor?
That's fine. I'll ask staff. It just to me, it doesn't make sense. 1/3 of the building is 8 stories. We just should be saying 7, 8 stories, not just 7 stories. But I'll ask staff to verify that. I'm not sure if this is for you or who, but in terms of lot coverage, the second density apartment residential mandates 90 meters squared per dwelling unit, and you are proposing 0.3 hectares or 3,000 meters squared. Could you explain that? The two are different. It's very difficult to judge how far off you are, or whether it's very close in terms of what's in our secondary plan and what you're proposing.
Mr. Wong?
Here, Mr. Chair, I'm trying to pull up the zoning amendment here. I believe the number you're referring to is the minimum lot area of being...
Yes.
Right, so I think our lot area would meet that requirement. So are you talking the coverage of the building itself, or
well, I'm just trying to make a sense of 95 meters squared, that's what we're supposed to have per dwelling unit, and your proposed 0.3 hectares or 3,000 meters squared.
Right. So the 0.3 meters, the 0.3 hectares essentially is the developable portion of the site.
But how does that compare to the 95 meters squared per unit, per dwelling unit?
Through you, Mr. Chair, I'm not sure exactly which section of the zoning bylaw you're referring to. I can definitely look into that.
Counselor, how about we deal with that? Maybe staff can
That's fine.
answer that
If
question.
staff can answer that, I'm okay with that.
We'll deal with that through the report then.
That's it for now. Thank you.
Thank you. Any other? Councillor Kim, second time. Questions to the applicant?
Thank you. Through you, Mr. Mayor, to the applicant. Is the builder open to having a terraced look so that the western-facing portion would be one floor less, so that we'd have a terrace look? Is the builder open to that?
Mr. Wong?
Mr. Chair, I can't speak on behalf of the builder, but it is definitely something we can take it back for consideration in terms of the western edge condition of the building. That is for sure.
Thank you.
Thank you. Any other questions to the applicant? Seeing none, so we'll move to the application 4.1. Someone like to move the recommendation? Councillor Gilliland, second. Councillor Kim, comments or questions to the report? No comments. Councillor Thompson.
Thank you. Through you to Mr. Waters. Just a couple questions. I guess first off, we'd made a reference to the community benefits charge. At our last GC, we talked about Bill 197 and the imposed changes that it was implementing. So would this application fall under the provisions of Bill 197 that we talked about last week?
Mr. Waters?
Through you, Mr. Mayor, yes, it would qualify because the applicant is proposing to go in an OPA to increase density, as what is proposed in the secondary plan.
Councillor?
Thank you. Second question is through you to Mr. Waters. We know that the close proximity to Conklin is not really compatible, but William Graham is fairly close off to this particular subject lands. So how does this structure, in terms of its density and or height, compare with the buildings or the condos along William Graham, which is fairly close?
Mr. Waters?
Mr. Mayor, William Graham has a number of buildings that have been constructed. I believe there's one or two that is 7 stories. The balance of them are 6 floors. The distance between Conklin and the site here is over 100 meters. It's over 300 feet. And as you can see by the photos, there's a lot of vegetation that's there. And if you look at if you look at the view from street level, you probably will see maybe the top of the building from that perspective.
Councillor?
Thank you. And I agree with Councillor Gallo's point that we are looking at a split into 7-8, but in general, it sounds like the buildings, at least from my perspective as well, are fairly compatible or similar to those on William Graham. That's it.
Thank you, Councillor. Councillor Kim?
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. At the beginning of the meeting, you read out that this planning review process is guided by the provincial policy statement, the Golden Horseshoe Growth Plan, the Regional OP, the Town OP, Lake Simcoe Regional Conservation Authority, and so forth. So through you to Mr. Waters, there are many new residents that have moved into the neighborhood adjacent to the west, and this is their first time going through the public planning process, and they have disclosed issues about property values, about sunlight, about noise, safety and privacy issues. So can you talk us through briefly about the planning process, and should this go to the OMB, which is now called LPAT? Can you walk us through and walk the audience through that process and what they're looking for, and whether their considerations will be heard?
Mr. Waters?
Through you, Mr. Mayor, if within the report itself, and as a condition of a complete application, we've identified a laundry list of studies that have been submitted by the applicant to address technical issues that have been discussed by the applicant and are contained in the report. The part of the planning process is to require those studies for staff to assess the application in addition to our partners such as the Conservation Authority of the region and the school boards. And as part of that public planning process, there is the public meeting that we're having tonight to hear the residents' input. That all gets put together, and then a recommendation report gets issued in terms of what's good planning from a staff perspective, and then council decides. In terms of the LPAT, you quite correctly pointed out the policy context. In addition to that, there are technical matters which the component studies address, such as, stormwater, impact on the environment, traffic, and there's also land use compatibility. Does it fit into the neighborhood? Is there an impact to the host neighborhood? And if there is, how is that mitigated? So those areas of evidence are provided at the LPAT, in addition to into the public input, because the public can be part of the LPAT process and provide a submission to that or to that board. So, and then the board decides if it's good planning or not at the end of the day.
Councillor?
Thank you. So in summary, they're looking more at the technical aspects of the planning process.
Mr. Waters?
Through you, Mr. Mayor. It's a combination, sir. It's not exactly technical, but it's also the policy context. And does it fit with where the provincial plans are at the moment? Other issues, how does it fit with the Conservation Authority plan as well? So it's a combination of items that are considered, and evidence is put forth either to support or not to support the development.
Okay. Thank you. Through you, so lastly, so things like would, as an example, market value, noise, privacy, sightline issues, sunlight, would those be variables that would be under consideration?
Mr. Waters?
Through you, Mr. Mayor. Some of those, yes. Marketability, no. The board doesn't get into marketability or property values generally. But yes, sunlight, views, impact to natural heritage definitely would be considered by the board.
Councillor?
Thank you very much.
Thank you. Councillor Humphreys?
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. Most of my questions were asked by Councillor Kim. Thank you so much. I just want to thank the delegate earlier this evening for coming through. I think it was your first time, and I want to appreciate residents coming forward. Just one comment, and we've talked a little bit about the 7 or 8 stories. Just get them down. Thanks. There's 7 or 8 stories, like 6.
Oh, what's the question, Councillor?
No, just a comment.
Oh, it's just a comment? Okay. Thank you. Councillor Gilliland?
Thank you, through you, Mr. Mayor, to Mr. Waters. Quick question about the parking. I know that there were some different numbers that were provided by the applicant tonight. Does it still stand that in your traffic and transportation part of the report that they must provide some adequate justification, since it doesn't really meet our minimum requirement?
Mr. Waters?
Through you, Mr. Mayor, yes, we have not received the parking study yet to justify or support the reduction in parking. We're waiting to receive that. And as you heard, there's been some issues regarding COVID and doing the surveys for comparable properties. So we will have to see that information, review it, and then to make a decision whether it supports a reduced parking ratio.
Councillor?
Thank you. I know the applicant was speaking about some proxy comparables of 1.06, and I just don't know how weighted that is considering our bylaws state 1.5. Can you explain whether or not this is really applicable in this situation?
Mr. Waters?
Through you, Mr. Mayor. Given that this is a suburban site, the 1.5 likely is more applicable than a reduced parking rate, as opposed to being near the GO station, for instance, or a major transit corridor. So we're going to have to take that into consideration, and we're interested to see what proxy sites they're going to use to justify the reduced parking rate.
Councillor?
Thank you very much. And I just want to, and this is just like me kind of understanding and learning, and there was a part here about the Lake Simcoe Conservation Authority and some technical comments that were related to stormwater management, and that they will be provided in the next submission, which is really good to hear. What did it mean when it said example woodlands and hydraulic features, but then it had kind of like a, in brackets, unevaluated wetlands? Is there something in question there that we don't quite understand as a wetland, but isn't?
Mr. Waters?
Through you, Mr. Mayor. I believe what you heard tonight is that this is a man-made water feature many years ago, and it's naturalized over time. So it's turned into a wetland. it doesn't sound like it's been evaluated either by the Conservation Authority or the province. So so it has to be determined whether it is a bona fide wetland or not. And I think that's something that we need to work on with the Conservation Authority.
Councillor?
Thank you very much. That's it for now.
Thank you. I got Councillor Gartner and then Councillor Gallo. Councillor Gartner?
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. Mr. Waters, I'm not clear. I believe we had that this zone would require 20-meter height, and I've got it up to 29.5 meters with the mechanical penthouse.
Mr. Waters?
Through you, Mr. Mayor. Councillor Gardner, are you asking for confirmation of that number?
Yes, please.
Yeah, I think you're right.
Thank you.
Councillor?
Thank you. Well, that's almost 10 meters above the allowed height. With respect to the dewatering, is that going to affect the pond?
Mr. Waters?
Through Mr. Mayor, that's one of the pieces of information we need to determine in accordance with the Conservation Authority and the region.
Councillor?
Through Mr. Mayor, I'm not clear. We're not sure if it's going to be dewatered?
Mr. Waters?
Through you, Mr. Mayor, that's one of the FSR that was submitted to support the application is under review at the moment. It's been identified that there is a dewatering issue. I think when they had installed the sewer on Leslie, I think there was a dewatering issue as well, is what I recall. So we have to manage that as part of this development, and that's what the study will tell us is how to manage it and the impact it will have on that wetland.
Councillor?
The way, through Mr. Mayor, the way to manage it is not to dewater it. If we dewater it, we're causing damage to the wildlife in the area. The same comment with respect to the stormwater management pond. That can't be used as a stormwater management pond. It's going to have a very negative effect on that wetland feature. So, is there another proposal? Is there an alternative proposal that's been submitted?
Mr. Waters?
Through you, Mr. Mayor, I'm not aware of any other proposal. Again, this is at the Conservation Authority, and they will provide us their technical expertise on whether that can be supported or not.
Councillor Gardner?
Well, notwithstanding anything that Lake Simcoe says, if that pond is dewatered, it will be severely damaged. And as a municipality and as environmental municipality, we can't allow that. So I would think what the municipality thinks is would take precedence in this case. I'm certainly hoping Lake Simcoe wouldn't allow that anyway. Going back to the 8 stories, this is a very high, compared to the homes, this on Conklin, this is very much higher elevation. So we're putting a 7-story or an 8-story plus another story for mechanical on a very high elevation compared to the homes on Conklin. And the picture of the vegetation, well, those trees certainly aren't 30 meters tall, plus an extra whatever the higher elevation is for the building. And I noticed that they're mostly deciduous trees. So how could we, how can the residents come to terms with this? Or maybe that's not a fair question of you, Mr. Waters.
Councillor, I was going to say
as a comment for now.
Yeah, that's a comment. That's not a fair question for.
Yeah,
Mr.
that's
Waters
not
to
a fair
answer.
question. Thank you. With respect to, I think, what Councillor Gallo was getting at, this the density allowed here is 35 to 50 units per net residential hectare. And according to my math, if we're going to use the 35 units, it's 7 times what's allowed. And if we're going to use the 50, it's 5 times what's allowed. To me, that seems quite unacceptable. And the other issue is they are including the buffer area in their calculation. The zoning here is quite specific. It has to be net residential hectares, so it can't include any buffer area. Could you, through Mr. Mayor, could you comment on that, Mr. Waters?
Mr. Waters?
Yes, Mr. Mayor. The density, I believe, is on the net developable or net residential area,
Yes.
which I believe, I thought it did include the buffer blocks, but I may stand corrected on
No.
that. Excluding natural feature limit and includes environmental buffers. That's what the applicant is proposing. I'm just going to confirm that here. Just let me go to the zoning map here.
I think I saw it somewhere in the report, I just don't know where.
Yeah, I believe that's what the applicant is excluding the natural heritage, but including the buffer blocks in their developable, in their calculation for density.
Councillor?
Thank you, so that's not allowed according to this zone. With respect to the amenity area and the calculation there, did you have an answer for that? Or will we wait?
Mr. Waters?
Through you, Mr. Mayor, it's obvious that they're looking for a different approach to measuring height and also to the amenity area as per our zoning bylaw. So they're asking for alternative definitions. So in terms of the amenity area, they're looking to vary the definition to include both outdoor space and the private balconies in the calculation.
Councillor?
And thank you. With respect to the outdoor space, I'm actually very sure that the zoning bylaw says you can't include landscaping features.
Mr. Waters?
Through Mr. Mayor, I'll have to confirm that.
Thank you.
Councillor?
And going back to the region, has the region given permission for this?
Mr. Waters?
Through you, Mr. Mayor, I don't know what permission, what that means, if the council can explain.
Sorry. It's, Councilor Gallo was referring to it, the buffer area for woodland, wetland, and water course. They were reserving their opinion on that. Have they made a comment?
Mr. Waters?
Through you, Mr. Mayor, I believe the reason why the region wanted to maintain its approval authority was the impact on the natural heritage, the Greenland system, and that they wanted to confirm the buffers as part of the OPA. As you can see, those buffers vary in depth. We still have to confirm that with the Conservation Authority.
And then the region has to also give permission?
Well, they have to basically agree with the buffer blocks.
Councillor?
Thank you. And I'm very glad that Mr. Waters mentioned the 1.5 parking spot calculation is more appropriate because this is suburban. Because I'm thinking there's a few apartments or condos on Yonge Street that's on the Viva Transportation Corridor. And then we have John West Way, which has a lot of seniors living there, so they may not be driving any longer or may only have gone down to one car. So I do think the 1.5 standard is the more appropriate one here. That's all, Mr. Mayor.
Thank you, Councillor. Councillor Gallo.
Thank you. And just to ask the same question about the lot area, minimum lot area, 95 meters squared per dwelling unit is what's allowed, and they're proposing this 0.3 hectares or 3,000 meters squared. And I'm trying to understand the difference and what the significance is.
Mr. Waters?
Through you, Mr. Mayor. It's a different way of measuring the minimum lot area. So what I believe the applicant has proposed is the actual net developable area of 0.3, as opposed to calculating 95 square meters per dwelling unit. I haven't done the math, so I don't know what 95 would translate into.
That would be helpful to know how far off they are, or if it's close, or if it's way off.
I suspect, sir, that the reason why they're not using 95 is because they would need more lot area.
I would suspect so too, but for me, sitting here trying to make a decision, I'd love to know, how can we compare to what's allowed to what they're proposing?
Yes. And we'll have that information for you, sir, when we report back.
Councillor?
Can you just go over why we wouldn't say that at least 1/3 of the building is 8 stories? Why we're choosing to say 7?
Mr. Waters?
Through you, Mr. Mayor, all these properties on Leslie have grade issues, as you can appreciate. So as you get to go to the west, they slope down. So the rear of the building is taller than the Leslie Street frontage. And I think there's another, what's going on in terms of the applicant's proposal is an alternate definition for measuring height, because they realize that they're going to be in excess of 26 meters. But the 7 stories on the Leslie frontage and the 8 stories on the rear does deliver them the end product that they're looking for. In essence, if you're going with 6 stories, you could have 7 at the back and 6 at the front, as long as you were within the 26-meter height parameter.
Councillor?
I get all that, but I mean, if we're going to refer back to, I think our OP says minimum 6 stories, if I'm not mistaken, and they're asking for, 7, 8. Is that right?
Mr. Waters?
Through you, Mr. Mayor, that's correct. So they're asking for an OPA to increase the density and the height.
So when we're referring back to what's allowed and we're making a reference, or at least their proposal, I think it would have been clear had we said 7, 8, because, if it was a small portion, and I understand that the slope of the land and all that, and if it was a small portion, perhaps it was insignificant, okay, but this is almost 1/3 of the building that is it's 8 stories. Listen, if this was near public transportation corridor, I would have no problem with going even higher and reducing the parking rate. And I completely agree with you that if you're close to a public transportation corridor, I have no issues with reducing the parking and increasing the height. To me, that makes absolute sense. This isn't. This is way over to the other side of town, and there's lots of hoops that still need to be, have to go through. I'm curious to see what else the public has to say in this petition. But I guess I have some issues, but maybe we can get through them, maybe not.
That all, Councillor? So we got Councillor Gardner next? No, Councillor Humphreys, then Councillor Humphreys, and then Councillor Gardner.
Great.
Second time, Councillor Humphreys.
Okay, thank you. Through Mr. Mayor, thank you so much. So, just not to be repeating comments we've heard around the table this evening, but when I go through all the, what our policies are in the designated area and in the proposed amendments, there's quite a few differences, and a little concerning. We did get a petition this evening for over 244 residents, and that was just at a first kick at it. So I'm sure we're going to hear a lot more. I do have some concerns for the residents in this area where some have purchased a property feeling that they would have this type of urban designation, and there's a chance that this can always happen. It's the right of the owner for sure. I do have some concerns with the height, actually some pretty serious concerns about the height, and I've been trying to think and listen about this lot area, 95 meters per dwelling unit and 0.3 hectares. There's no, I can't compare, like Councillor Gallo said earlier, so it's almost like, so for me, what I'd like to see if it can come back at a very much more comparable table, so we really know exactly what is being proposed versus what is allowed. And I'm also asking if you can work with the developer to really drill down and to look at what they've heard this evening, and to look at lowering the height, really looking at the lot coverage. They're going a lot higher. We're saying 35% is allowed. They're asking for 48. So they have complied in a few areas, but there's a lot more work that they can do. And I'm hoping that they'll hear what, again, heard from council this evening and from the residents. So I'm just, and just to throw it out there, I'm not exactly sure that this is ready for a future council meeting. There's so many unknowns right now. I don't know if I would like to recommend another public planning. I don't want to waste anybody's time, but I just don't feel there's any concrete information here for me this evening. So I'll just throw it out there. Some more peers would like to speak, and we can go back to that. Thanks.
Thank you. Councillor Gardner. Second time.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. I also agree that this needs to come back to a public planning meeting. Just as a comment about the LPAT, it's really hard for residents to ask for status, and it seems to me anyway that LPAT doesn't consider their concerns. So following on that, we're here to protect our residents. They had a certain expectation, and that expectation, if we allow this, we won't be upholding our planning. And we have an official plan, and we have zoning bylaws that cover this area, OPA 73. So I think we owe it to our residents to do a much better job with this. There's a lot of issues. The 7-8 stories. Really it's 9 if you look at the mechanical. So this zone allows a 20-meter high building. I mean, it doesn't allow this building at all, actually. It allows medium density. The developer's asking for quite high density here. So this isn't allowed in our OP. But in any case, even if we do allow an RA2, the exemption zone is a 10-meter height. And as I said, as the resident said to me, this is at a much higher elevation than their properties. So whatever the difference in elevation is between their properties and the surface of the land that the building is going to be built on, and then you have to add the extra 30 meters. So it's just, it would be just shocking that we would allow anything like this, and I think the developer has heard that. If this project requires the pond to be dewatered, I think it should be an outright denial. It's time. We need to stand up for the environment. We've all said we do, and we're going to, and so we'll have to. And with respect to the same thing, with respect to a stormwater management pond, I can't think of any wetland feature that we've allowed to be turned into a stormwater management pond. It's efficient for the developer, but it's destructive for the pond. The other, also environmentally, what's concerning is that our zoning says that when we're calculating area that a building can be built on, any buildings can be built on, it has to exclude the environmental buffers, and this development is including them. So I think that's a hit to the environment. We have it in our policies because we're trying to protect the environment. Here we would be allowing a developer, again, to do something that would be contrary to environmental protection. With respect to the trees, very pretty slides of trees, but they look like they're mostly deciduous. So there may be some protective coverage during the summer months, the fall, but then winter, spring, a lot of the area would be bare. The trees would be bare. So, I mean, we can't accept that as protective of the residents. It's protective all the time, or it's not protective at all. The amenity area, that is concerning. Because we are trying to provide these residents, and these apartments generally are smaller, but even in the larger apartments, and certainly throughout Toronto, they're sticking to this amenity regulation because people need a place to gather socially. And hopefully COVID will stop at some point, but you know, if we're trying to social distance, physical distance in a smaller amenity area, that's not acceptable either. The other thing that wasn't covered is the 25% of all new residential developments being provided that meet the definition of affordable housing. The developer hasn't looked at this. I would like to know how that's going to be carried out, and that's completely outside Section 37 of the Planning Act, which is bonusing something in exchange for giving extra height or density.
Councillor, you're past your 5 minutes.
Yeah, and I'm finished.
Okay.
But Mr. Mayor, this is just so unacceptable.
Thank you, Councillor. Councillor Kim?
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. Councillor Gardner raises a good point regarding the stormwater management pond. Through you, Mr. Mayor, to Mr. Waters, I'm not sure if Mr. Waters can answer this question, as Mr. Downey's not here. If the development could not use the existing pond that was made by the previous resident as a stormwater management tool, what are the alternatives?
Mr. Waters?
Through you, Mr. Mayor, there's a couple alternatives. The first, if they are going to use the pond, they could control the flow. Or they could store the stormwater in underground tanks, and then it would slowly release into the storm pond.
Councillor?
Okay, thank you. So if the Lake Simcoe Conservation Authority recommends that a different stormwater management pond be built, that would drastically change the footprint of this development, would it not?
Mr. Waters?
Through you, Mr. Mayor, that would probably not be, you won't be able to develop this property if you were to do that.
Councillor?
Thank you. And lastly, the Lake Simcoe Conservation Authority, and I'm sure Councillor Gardner, as a part of that board, would be a great proponent of, or would be a proponent of the environment and would state her case there directly for us. But at what process, or at what time in the process will we get a report from the and a recommendation from the Lake Simcoe Conservation Authority?
Mr. Waters?
Through you, Mr. Mayor, those comments would be coming through the review of the stormwater study and also the FSR study as well. They would be part of the review process. It may require additional work to be generated by the applicant to address the comments raised through that initial review. It may take two or three rounds of back and forth with the Conservation Authority to satisfy them that the environment is being protected in accordance with their standards and targets.
Councillor?
Thank you. So that's a big issue because if the recommendation indeed is to have a new stormwater management pond be built, and that may dissuade the development in this current form, then there's no point in bringing this to general committee. So I would go with the recommendation from Councillor Gardner and Councillor Humphreys that we bring this back to public planning. So if that's the case, then is it the GC that will trigger it, or can we just say, hey, we need the environmental report prior to the next public planning? Is that something feasible that we could proceed with?
Mr. Waters?
Through you, Mr. Mayor. It sounds like there's a lot of outstanding issues that council would like to have answered prior to feeling confident to moving to general committee. So we would come back and we would respond to those outstanding matters comprehensively, so you could, make an informed decision at the end of the day.
Councillor?
Great, thank you very much.
Councillor Gilliland, second time.
Thank you, through you, Mr. Mayor. Thank you, Councillor Kim, for that suggestion coming back to public planning, and Councillor Gardner and Humphreys. I think it's a great idea. I guess my only comment is, while the developer does have a lot of work to do, we've got a lot of questions here, so I'm not going to repeat everything that I've heard. I do have a question for Mr. Waters. Is there a median measurement height that's determined from the highest point and the lowest point to determine the height of this building, since one part of it's 23.5 and the other part is 27? So do you take the median of that to calculate the overall height of the building?
Mr. Waters?
Through you, Mr. Mayor, if you use the definition in our zoning bylaw, it's average finished grade.
Thank you.
Councillor?
Thank you. As far as being by close to a major highway, has the region identified Leslie Street as a high-density area for building?
Mr. Waters?
Through you, Mr. Mayor, through the secondary plan, it's been designated with development rights for medium-high residential, which is explained in the staff report. So it does have development rights, not for the proposal that's being brought forward before you, but for a 6-story building with a maximum of 50 units per net residential hectare.
Councillor?
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. Mr. Waters, as far as the comparables in the area, I know that Councillor Thompson had mentioned some of the comparables. Are there other buildings in the neighborhood that kind of reflect that height of the 7 stories that are currently exist, that are pretty close proximity to this building now?
Mr. Waters?
Through you, Mr. Mayor, I'm not aware of any others except on William Graham Drive in the immediate vicinity of the subject lands.
Councillor?
Thank you. And I kind of like the idea that Councillor Kim had mentioned about the staggered or tiered design, so hopefully the designers will take that in consideration to stagger it near the end. I know we've got some sort of a design with the church on Yonge Street to kind of mitigate some of the different grading, so hopefully that's something they can take to consideration with staff. Is that something that you might support in the comments that you hear today?
Mr. Waters?
Through you, Mr. Mayor, through the review by the Urban Design Review Panel, that wasn't identified as something that should be implemented. Typically, the 45-degree angle is used where you have residential almost right beside the lot line to provide that step back. And in this case, it wasn't recommended. But we can always bring it to the table and see what the reaction is.
Councillor?
Thank you. Okay, that's always good to hear. As far as excluding the environmental buffer into the calculation, but yet this includes that, can you confirm?
Mr. Waters?
Through you, Mr. Mayor, let me look into that. I can't, off the top of my head, say it does or it doesn't include, but I don't want to give you the wrong information. So when we come back to public planning, if that's what the decision is, we'll have that information for you.
Councillor?
Thank you. Again, so I'm just going to end that there is still a lot of work to do, and I understand that they are going to be coming back with a lot more information. So obviously we're very limited with the amount of answers that we can get today, but I think it's pretty clear that we do need these answers. So do we need to make an amendment to the motion on the floor to have a separate public meeting as opposed to a future general committee, as Councillor Kim had stated, would that be the most appropriate thing to move forward with today until we get all this extra information?
Councillor, I'll wait till the comments are done, and then I'll ask the mover and the seconder. We'll get to that.
Okay, that's all. Thanks.
Thank you. Councillor Gallo, second time.
Thank you. Just quickly, if it does go to public planning, under legal considerations, it says that if a decision is not made by October 20th, 2020, the applicant may be subject to appeal. Application may be subject to appeal. So is the timing on our side? Can we get this to another public planning meeting, get all of those reports before October 20th?
Mr. Waters?
I think I know the answer, but...
Through you, Mr. Mayor, you're shaking your head, and I will agree with you, sir. I think that just shows you how realistic the new timelines are for bringing planning applications and bringing them forward to council for decisions. Applicants are not going to appeal because then it basically stops the process. And this is sort of the first round of review that council has seen. So they're going to work with us to come up with the best development based on what we've heard today. So I'm not concerned about that date at all.
Okay.
Councillor?
And just either it's now or, I mean, probably not now because it'd be too hard to calculate if we don't know. You know, what I'd like to visualize when we're dealing with these things is by right, what could the applicant build there? You said a 6-story. I'm not sure how many units that percentage would equal to, but that information is, to me and probably to the public, very helpful when you're deciding, you know, from one to another. You know, what are we comparing? What could they actually tomorrow submit a building permit for and build there, compared to what they're asking, and how drastic is it? To me, that's very helpful, and I just can't get that with the information that's before me. I'm hopeful that the next time around, be it public planning, clearly we're not going to meet the guidelines, and I think the second application is even worse in terms of timelines. So I'm in favor of it going back to public planning and go through the thorough details and then make a decision.
Thank you, Councillor. Councillor Thompson, second time.
Thank you. Just a comment. When this comes back to, it sounds like another future public planning meeting, I think it would be helpful for me and maybe other members of council to include in the report context of this building with those on William Graham. Because when I look back at the William Graham reports, many of the same concerns with regards to density, height, location, setback, and so forth were expressed in those reports, and yet council ultimately approved them. And the height on those are 7 stories and 28 meters, and in some case the slope is such that there's an 8-story on, you know, if you were to look at the elevation from the west side. So I think there is some context that council as a whole needs to take into consideration, because at the end of the day, if the applicant wants to take us to the province and appeal to any decision we make, you know, we need to be consistent in how we apply our official plans and amendments and so forth. And so you have a number of buildings that are 200, maybe 300 meters away that the council has approved in the past with similar concerns, not all, but similar. And so I think it's good to have that context in a future report to be able to council to see what has been done before and allowed, and what this applicant is asking for in relation to that. Because if you have a bunch of buildings that are 28 meters away, 28 meters high, sorry, 28 meters? Yeah, high, and this one is 29, it's not relatively that much off, but yet those were the same concerns expressed with 6 stories and 20 meters and rural and the density of 35 and 50 and so forth that were in those reports for William Graham back in 2017. And so I just think that context helps provide information to council for their consideration. Whether you agree with it or not, it's just good information to have.
Thank you, Councillor. So my understanding from hearing everyone around the table is that we'd all prefer to go back to a public planning meeting instead of a general committee meeting. I'll just ask the mover and the seconder if you guys would like to do that. And if everyone's good with that, then we'll just make it a friendly amendment instead of having to go through the rigmarole of voting this down and then having to put forward a new. So Councillor Gilliland, you're okay with that? Councillor Kim, you're okay with that? Is everyone good with that, which is a friendly amendment? All right, so we'll switch that, Mr. Clerk, to report to a future public planning meeting. Yeah, and just while you're putting that up, obviously, you know, there's a lot of information that council still needs to make a proper decision, and so we'll get that. In time while we're working through this, I hope that our, you know, Councilor Gardner, you brought up some great points as far as the wetlands, the ponds, dewatering. I hope that as our representative at Lake Simcoe, that you will speak to them about these issues and work through that process as they develop the reports that will come back to us. So I look forward to hearing on your end on what will be occurring at Lake Simcoe Region Conservation Authority. With that, Council, I will call the vote. Are we all in? Councillor Gardner, your vote?
I vote yes.
Thank you. That carries. Mr. Clerk, if we can just for the public that is here or anyone that's watching, as I mentioned, if you wanted to keep informed, if you can fill out a sheet, was it, what was the address again? If you just go over to see our secretary and she'll give you the address, you can just fill that out. They'll send something out when the next meeting does occur, so you can be informed with everything that's going on. And I'm sure we'll put something up on the website as well, so that way you can be reached out. Okay? Thank you for coming up. We're going to take our health break, as required per procedural bylaw, Council. So we'll be back in 10 minutes. Okay? Start. So, Council, we are back. We're moving to app 4.2. If we can get the applicant to come up.
Very good. If I might, good evening, Your Worship, members of council. My name is Kevin Bichard. I'm a senior associate with Weston Consulting. The address of our company is at 201 Millway Road in Vaughan. Here with me tonight, I'm representing RCG Aurora North GP Inc., who are the Rice Group, and the owners of properties at 16,005 and 16,055 Bayview Avenue. And that's, of course, at the intersection of St. John's Side Road. Tonight with me, I have two members from the Rice Group, John McGovern and also Jenny Stark. Our applications are for official plan amendment and zoning bylaw amendment, and they were received by the town on June 19th of this year and deemed complete on July 2nd of this year. The purpose of the applications is to permit the development of a 6-story apartment building which would accommodate 79 residential units on the southeast corner of Bayview Avenue, as I said earlier, with St. John's Side Road. The lot ownership would be maintained by the Rice Group. There would not be a severance, and there would not be a separate block created. The purpose or intent of this application is to create a rental apartment building which would be directed at a seniors population and retirement community. I can go to the next slide. In terms of the site context, the proposed site would be accessed through existing, of course it's a developed property, commercial property, and the site already has accesses from a right in, right out on St. John's Side Road, as well as a signal on Bayview Avenue. Vehicular access to the building would be through underground access, underground parking on the north side of the building through a cantilevered entrance, and I'll provide more detail on that a little later. The development area of the site is identified in red, and it represents about 3/4 of an acre, or about 3,100 square meters. The balance of the property is the commercial lot. And of course, the site is surrounded to the north and to the east in terms of natural feature for an unnamed tributary of the Holland River East Branch. In a larger contextual setting, the site is surrounded by a low-rise multi-residential townhouses, also single-family and commercial developments on the 4 corners surrounding the property. The property contains 4 commercial retail buildings already, and if you know the plaza, you know it contains the T&T supermarket, restaurants, some service commercial uses, and one pad that's under development, for what I understand, is going to be a financial services institution. The pre-consultation meeting for this application was held in July 18th of 2019. The applications for the official plan amendment and the zoning bylaw were filed in June 19th, 2020, and deemed complete July 2nd. And of course, there were a suite of studies and reports that were submitted with the applications responding to the PAC meeting that was held. And we can discuss those in more detail as I go through the presentation. In terms of the policy framework, the site is identified as being within the urban area on the urban structures map of the York Region official plan. And so being within, of course, the settlement area, it provides for the development of the property. The town's official plan designates the property as community commercial, reflecting its existing commercial use in the Bayview Northeast Area 2B Secondary Plan, or OPA 30. The proposed residential uses and density are not contemplated within the official plan designation. And of course, that's what's driving the application for amendment to the official plan to propose a medium-density residential use. Now, in that use, it will require exemptions to 6 stories where are requested, where in the secondary plan 4 would otherwise be permitted, and a density of 102 units per acre, where a density of 40 units per acre would be permitted. Certainly, the proximity to St. John's Side Road and Bayview Avenue and higher order transit or transit is driving some of the density on this proposal. But of course, as you're aware, provincial initiatives in the PPS, the growth plan, regional official plan, that facilitate increased intensification and development to create a more efficient use of services, to minimize land consumption, all factor into the narrative that supports this application and is set out in our planning justification report. The proposed application, in our view, is an appropriate amendment to the official plan because it assists the town in achieving their objectives, particularly to provide for a sector of rental housing and a variety of housing options to residents. Additionally, in our view, the secondary plan has also been identified by the town as a suitable area for increased density. In terms of zoning, as I mentioned a little earlier, the subject property is identified as Community Commercial 4, C4 exemption, which does not permit the requested residential apartment use or density. The proposed rezoning will permit an apartment building. However, there will be exemptions required or requested relating to interior and side yard setbacks and providing for an increased height to 18.45 meters and a lot coverage of 47%. I want to clarify that there are no exemptions being requested for parking reductions on this site. And I will speak to that in a moment as we go through. So many of the provisions, and I've set them out on this table, and I've got to keep up with my slides. I'm apologizing here. These masks I'm finding are a real distraction when you're going through the materials. So that was the zoning. In terms of the project overview, I've provided a slide which gives a summary of the details on this site. Many of the standards are being met in this design proposal. Some variances are being requested or considered in terms of side yard and in terms of front yard setbacks. We have yet to file a site plan application with the town, and certainly that application and the discussions with staff will bear out the final layout and setbacks and zoning variances that we will be considering for this site. One of the aspects that I want to focus on and this is perhaps, in listening to the last deputation, is on the amount of amenity area that's being considered in this plan. Our application shows, and our standards show, a deficiency of total amenity area to 2.9 meters squared per unit. Now, I understand in the calculation that I presented that it does not include the balcony area. I think before going too much further in the discussion in this area, it's something that we're going to take back and take a closer look at in our discussions with staff and review of this application in light of the conversations that were held in the previous application. So, an additional matter, and I want to speak to it again, is the provision of parking. A total of 119 parking spaces are being considered for this development. The site, in fact, would be deficient one parking space. We think through additional refinements to the site plan that we can meet the full parking standard and would intend to bring back an application that is fully compliant with the Town of Aurora zoning parking standard. There have been concerns that we're aware of about the impact of this development on traffic generation on this site. Our traffic consultant, Mark Engineering, has taken a look at that and without getting into too much detail, has found that the traffic generation for the residential component of this site will be about half or less than a similar square footage of retail use on this property. So the net will be an improvement, if I can, over the projected or potential traffic generation from this site. So I can speak to that in more detail if council desires in the question period. But it's clear from us that this site will not generate new traffic or additional traffic than otherwise was planned or considered in the development of the property. I want to just put up a couple of slides showing the current transit network. The site is currently serviced well by the existing transit network, York Region Transit, with connections to Viva. It's also along a transit network that will be expanded within the frequent transit, upon the frequent transit network as identified by the region. So we think this site is very well positioned to provide for alternative transportation, transit modes with the development of the density that is proposed. In terms of the proposed site plan, I had mentioned earlier that 79 residential units are proposed, 15 of which are one-bedroom units, that's 19%, and 64 are two-bedroom units, or 81%. The typical size for one-bedroom units are 67 square meters, or about 725 square feet, while two-bedroom units range from 78 to 80 square meters, or 827 or 980 square feet. The largest units are going to be included on the ground floor. As I mentioned a little bit earlier, the target market is the retirement market and adult market. This development is not proposing three-bedroom units because it's not consistent with its market objectives. The proposed floor layout of the building is uniform on floors 2 through 6, with 3 one-bedroom units per floor and 12 two-bedroom units per floor. The proposed development of rental apartments, we feel, and our client feels, will improve the variety of housing options seen in Aurora. Certainly, in their determination, there is a limited availability of rental units, which can be afforded to a greater portion of the population. The rental units will be priced at market value. We're also mindful of the comments that were made respecting affordable housing, and that's an area that we will have to bring forward in discussion with staff to get a better understanding of the nature of that requirement or consideration in the application. In terms of the elevations, I'm showing elevations of the south frontage and the west frontage. So the south frontage has a natural downslope and it's adjacent to St. John's Side Road. The natural incline of the landscape creates an appearance of reduced massing. In terms of the west, this side of the building is largely hidden from the motorists and pedestrians, etc., from the trees and vegetation that are in the adjacent open space natural feature adjacent to the property. Also, in dealing with elevations, I'm showing the north elevation. Landscape features, including trees and vegetative plantings, are envisioned for the areas between the proposed building perimeter and new parking areas. And I'm going to illustrate that perhaps with greater clarity in the landscape plan that I'll show you in a moment. Pedestrian access to the building is going to be from the west side of the building, and is viewed from the surrounding commercial plaza. Let me go to the landscape plan. And here you see on the landscape plan the access off of St. John's, but you see that the building has been moved forward in creating a street image and frontage and presence along that right-of-way with a landscaping treatment. On the east side, you will see that we have a vegetative screening, but that's also adjacent to an open space natural area. The depth of that natural area from this building, proposed building, to the Lundy Heritage House is about 145 meters. Of course, there's a valley between the two, as you would understand, and so you have comparable heights. Ground elevation heights. You can see in this image on the north side of the building you have a transportation turnaround, a vehicle turnaround, and there's a canopy that extends about halfway over that vehicle turnaround area so that residents coming into the drop-off area will be able to pause, drop off, and move forward. Of course, the building above that canopy continues on in a face wall. The ground floor area contains loading area, garbage room, 3 amenity rooms, as well as a lobby, concierge, and outdoor amenity area on the southwest of the building. So the amenity rooms might contain such features as a kitchenette or an exercise. Those will all be determined as we go through the review of the application with site plan approval. That's my presentation this evening. I'm available for questions.
Thank you. Mr. Waters?
All right. Good evening, Mr. Mayor, members of council, and members of the public. My name is Matthew Peverini, and I'm with the town's planning department. We are here this evening for the statutory public meeting to discuss the official plan and zoning bylaw amendment applications on the property municipally known as 16,005 to 16,055 Bayview Avenue. The property is located at the northeast corner of Bayview Avenue and St. John's Side Road and currently contains 4 commercial retail buildings with a 5th under construction and at-grade parking. Access to the property is provided at an always signalized intersection at the northwest limits of Bayview Avenue and a right-in, right-out driveway along St. John's Side Road. Surrounding land uses include a natural heritage system, stormwater management pond, and the Art Ferguson Park to the north, St. John's Side Road, a commercial plaza, and low-medium density residential to the south, a natural heritage system and low-density residential to the east, and Bayview Avenue and low-medium density residential to the west. It's important to note that only the southeast portion of the property, delineated as the subject lands on this slide, are subject to the proposed applications, and this portion of the property has an area of 0.31 hectares, which is the equivalent to 0.77 acres. This area of the lot is currently vacant. The entire property is designated as community commercial by the Bayview Northeast Area's 2B Secondary Plan, or OPA 30, as amended by OPA 11 in 2016. This designation intends to provide opportunities for low-rise multi-tenant buildings to accommodate uses that generally cater to weekly shopping and service needs of the community. The property is also zoned Community Commercial Exception 463 zone by the Town of Aurora zoning bylaw as amended. This zone generally permits a range of commercial and retail uses on the property. Residential is not permitted as of right. The applicant is seeking land use permissions to permit the development of a 6-story residential building with 79 residential units and 119 parking spaces on the subject lands. The building is envisioned to be purpose-built rental, with ownership maintained under the current owners in perpetuity. No application for site plan approval has been submitted at this time. The development will be accessed at the northwest edge of the subject lands through a drive aisle, and this aisle will provide access to at-grade loading, 2 levels of underground parking, and the main lobby to the building. Visitor parking is provided at grade along the aisle as shown on this slide. This is a conceptual rendering of the building looking north from St. John Side Road. Again, the applicant is proposing a 6-story residential building with a height of approximately 18.5 meters. Amenity area is provided both indoors and outdoors on the ground floor level. The applicant is seeking an official plan amendment to redesignate the southeast portion of the property from community commercial to medium to high density residential as seen on this slide. This requires an amendment to Schedule AA of OPA 30 and Schedule H of the Town of Aurora official plan to recognize a new site-specific policy area. Site-specific policy amendments to the proposed medium high density residential designation are also required and generally include the addition of a residential apartment building as a permitted use, 6-story height, whereas the policy provides that buildings shall generally not exceed 4 stories, and to permit a net residential density of 102 units per acre, whereas the policy provides a maximum of 40 units per acre. The applicant is also proposing to rezone the subject lands from Community Commercial Exception Zone to Second Density Apartment Residential Exception Zone. This exception zone will recognize site-specific provisions, which generally include recognizing the area of the subject lands, the 0.31 hectares, a residential apartment building as a permitted use, the height permission of 6 stories or 18.5 meters, a reduced front and interior side yard setback of 3 meters and 1.5 meters respectively, a lot coverage of 47%, a minimum amenity area revision, and a reduced visitor parking rate from 20% of the total spaces required to 8%. It's important to note for the visitor parking spaces in consultation with the applicant, this may be revised, and during the question period, it may be pertinent to confirm with the applicant. The proposed applications will be reviewed in the context of all provincial, regional, and municipal policy documents as listed on this slide. Through the first submission, early comments from departments and agencies include discussion about securing community benefits through a Section 37 agreement, as both an increase in height and density are proposed above existing land use permissions. Liaising with the town and the region to explore opportunities and programs related to purpose-built rental developments. Submission of additional material to the Lake Simcoe Region Conservation Authority to assess stormwater management, water balance, and phosphorus levels. The opportunity for the applicant to appear before the town's design review panel to receive feedback on urban design matters in advance of a future report to General Committee and a future submission of a site plan application, and overall compatibility with the area. Several comments from residents have been received in advance of this public meeting, both in writing and by phone call. Generally, these comments include the need for affordable housing in the town and questioning availability of units for low income, disruption of existing neighborhood due to compatibility issues and unappealing views and streetscape, the potential for decreased property value, the need for more small business in the plaza as opposed to residential, increased traffic and congestion generated by the proposed development, concern for pedestrian safety, and not meeting the town's strategic plan goal of supporting environmental stewardship and sustainability. For next steps, staff will take comments received from tonight's discussion and provide council with a recommendation report at a future general committee meeting. And that concludes my presentation. Thank you for your time, and staff are available to answer questions as required.
Thank you. At this time, I'll open the floor to the public. Any members of the public that would have some? I could ask your name and your address, and you have 5 minutes, and at 1 minute you'll hear a chime on the
Good evening, Your Worship. Members of Council, my name is Heidi Shellhorn. I live in the community of Hadley Court, which is just the northwest part of the intersection at St. John's and Bayview. And as a resident, a decades-long resident of Aurora, I want to take this opportunity because I think it's really important for you to hear from the community itself. Because of COVID, I think a lot of community and residents cannot or may not be able to attend, and I'm hopeful that they're zooming in. I had a lot of conversations with people who are potentially impacted by this development, many of who share the similar concerns to myself. I don't proclaim to be a representative of them, but I know that I have their support. And in our conversation, some of the things that come to mind, I'm mindful that I only have 5 minutes, and I will say that I think that's not enough time because we are passionate about this development.
Heidi, I'll just interrupt. You can come back up a second time. So.
Okay, I anticipate that, and I want to thank Matthew. He's been very, very great with the disclosure and the information. One concern was that we were notified only 2 weeks ago about the specifics of the development itself, and then I was only really getting into the details itself when I got the report through the minute meetings or the agenda. Hearing tonight that it's a development that's geared towards seniors, while we recognize as a community that we do need further accommodation with the vacancy being so low, vacancy rate. However, and I'm glad you touched on it, Matthew, there is concern with senior safety in such a highly trafficked intersection. Pedestrian safety is going to be a significant concern. I'm interested in what the mitigations are going to be around that. Some of the other concerns we have are the environmental impacts on the area to the east, specifically the watercourse and the ponds, which are adjacent to St. John's Side Road itself. The streetscape. The streetscape is a concern because right now the proposed development is totally inconsistent with what is happening in that area. And it goes to the comments that Councillor Thompson made earlier when he said that, we ourselves, you yourselves, I'm speaking you as a collective because you were speaking about council, you yourself have approved previous developments and now are looking at the first development proposed tonight. Well, you have an opportunity to show some leadership to the community and really pause before you make a decision on this, because it's going to affect so many people. This is contrary also to what the designated zonage was purposed for, so that's a consideration and a concern to the community. Peripheral parking, and we talked about the visitor parking tonight, residential parking that will be allotted in this development. A concern that will emerge is our streets are going to be impacted by those who are not going to be able to park at this facility, and there will be a lot of peripheral parking on streets that already don't have enough parking space. Increased traffic, I spoke to that earlier. The traffic flow will be a concern because it will all be moving out towards Bayview itself and St. John's, which is already a highly intensified area of pedestrian and vehicular movement. And it is currently designated as a community commercial zone and I would hope that council is going to take their time in making this decision on behalf of the residents. I will close by saying that many residents articulated the desire to reach out to council, to speak their mind, and I'm going to encourage them to do that, but also to petition if necessary. So we are definitely looking forward to this. Thank you.
Thank you, Heidi. Any other members of the public? Come forward. And get you just state your name, your address, and I'll remind you have 5 minutes.
I'll keep it as brief as possible as well. I don't have too much to add to what the previous resident said. It's along some of the similar lines. So my name is Robert Abatangelo. I live at 96 Lewis Honey Drive, so it's one of the streets to the south of the proposal. My main issue, well, there's a couple issues. The first one, first and foremost, would just be the overall fit to the area. It does not, I don't believe this building, especially at this density, fits the immediate area whatsoever. I know there's some similar buildings on John West Way. Obviously, there's the ones off of Leslie, which have recently been built, serve a sort of similar purpose, similar size. But in the immediate area, there's really nothing like this, and I think the official plan exists for a reason. And the fact that the community housing zoning allows for 40 units per acre, as Matthew said, and now it's being proposed to go up to 102 per acre because the site's slightly less than an acre, I believe, the proposed site. That's more than double, which, this is going to be might not sound like a large building in reference to the previous one we were speaking about earlier tonight, but fronting right on St. John's Sideway, a 6-story building, is going to be quite obtrusive, in my opinion. It doesn't really fit the curb appeal of the overall area, of the immediate area. It's mostly commercial community, low retail, and single-family residential. So, that's just an overall concern, is that one right there. And then the other major concern is, how are they going to ensure that the building will only be, I guess, occupied by seniors? Or is that just a hope? Is it actually something that's going to be like a minimum requirement? Because obviously, being rental housing, only learning of that this evening, that makes it even a little bit more concerning, because I hate to, draw sort of stereotypes or what have you, or bias, but I'm in real estate. I'm an appraiser. I'm also a real estate agent. I can tell you that the reality is these biases exist for a reason. Rental housing typically is not always the most desirable in terms of what it eventually does over the long term to the overall area and the community. That being said, it can be a little bit different if it's senior rental housing, but is that going to be a mandate? Like, is there a minimum age to live in this building, or can anyone eventually occupy it? Because typically, again, I know it sounds biased, but I'm saying this based on years of experience, having been in thousands of units and buildings. If it's catering to rentals, it's going to eventually start to deteriorate that area. And obviously, as a resident, that's heartbreaking. So I can tell you firsthand, again, I live on Lewis Honey. When they built the stacked townhouses, Daniels did right behind me, there isn't a dirtier area in the subdivision in that entire 4 square kilometer radius of Bayview Northeast. I walk there frequently with my kids, and there is constantly just littered garbage all over that area. And I'm talking about the section of the stacked townhouses right there off of Kids Circle, Wynn Place. It's absolutely awful. I've called the town about it before, and they say, well, the condo corporation, that's their responsibility. They need to clean it up. Bottom line is, you get a certain type of housing, you get a certain type of occupants and residents. I know people are going to say, oh, Robert, you're being biased, but it's the truth. And this could potentially happen as well. Anytime you start increasing that density, these are some of the issues that come along with it, and it's just awful. So it used to be, I've lived there before any of that was erected, when it was just farmland, and it was always very clean and tidy, and now you walk there and it's just littered with garbage all down the street, and no one picks it up, because a lot of them are renting. I've been in those units, many of those units, and it's mostly renters, and they ain't going to pick up the garbage. So yeah, that's pretty much the main issues I have. Again, I'm a little bit worried about the traffic as well, but I was pleased to hear the applicant mention that they've done a study, and it sounds like it's not going to actually increase the traffic. It's going to be better than if it was commercial, so that part's encouraging. But again, the main concern is the building. It just doesn't fit this neighborhood whatsoever. I mean, you've got plazas and stuff like that. You've got commercial plazas with little restaurants that, has been great. It's been great additions to the community. This isn't necessarily something that serves all of the members of that immediate area, Like, it just doesn't really fit to me, although I understand, obviously, low-income housing is a problem. the question, I guess, would be then, does the building need to be the proposal that's put forward? Does it need to be as dense as it is? Does it need to be 102 units per acre when the allowance is initially for 40? Do we need to push it that much? You know, so anyways, that's it. Thank you for your time.
Thank you. Any other members of the public? Welcome. If I can just get you to state your name and your address, and I'll remind you have 5 minutes.
Hello, Mr. Mayor and councillors. Thank you for your time. My name is Emil Setare at 152 De Graaf Crescent, which is the housing directly on the other side of the ravine, the valley, for this proposed monstrosity. I would like to I'll try to be efficient with my time and brief. With any sort of rental property, with this sort of affordable housing, there are certain dangers that come with it. There are certain issues that come with this sort of housing to any sort of community. And we have to be aware of this. We have to know where we live. We have to consider this as being in Aurora. And to be frank, Aurora is not Richmond Hill. I am also a real estate sales representative. I know the area very well. And so we need to be aware of this. I'm very proud that Aurora isn't Richmond Hill. We don't want Aurora to be Richmond Hill. We've seen it. You all live here. You drive there. You know what it is. No one wants to be there. I've had family who are running away from Richmond Hill and love Aurora for what it is because of these rules. And this proposed project shouldn't even go past this stage, in my opinion, as it is proposed, in its current state. Property values will be hit, especially on that side of the ravine, I guarantee it. The residents have paid premiums for these lots. Hundreds of thousands of dollars, $100,000, $150,000 for a premium lot directly, the Lundy House and all across, right there, all of the adjacent housing. That is a concern. Certainly privacy is a concern. Looking at the elevation from the street, that will be 8 stories, because you can see as it overhangs. Right there's 2 stories beneath it. And there's not a tree in North America that can possibly reach that height to provide us with the privacy that we truly invested in. Traffic and congestion, they can say it all they want. We've seen it. Richmond Hill. Traffic and congestion will increase. I don't care what they say. I've studied civil engineering as well. I have a diploma. I know how they skew the numbers. Construction, noise pollution, dust, debris, and of course the effects on the environment, that ravine that we all love. Animals will be affected. I also have a biology degree. There's no way you can avoid it. And it will be long lasting. Certainly the animals and certainly the environment will rebound. But we have to be aware of what's happening. You can't just ignore it. Aurora, I'm proud to be in Aurora. I love this area. They claim that they're targeting the retired demographic, the senior demographic, but it's not a retirement building. There's no rule to hold them to the fire on this. I mean, they want to make money, they'll rent it to whoever they want, whoever gives them the money. Unless there's some sort of a clause that you insert into this. Another thing is this construction will ensure these properties will be unsellable or will have to be sold at a loss, especially during construction, and absolutely after the construction is complete. This is unacceptable in my opinion. I ask all of you to truly consider this. I saw how truly, so you were so precise in your questions on the previous building. I gained a lot of respect seeing this in person. And I do appreciate everything that you do. I certainly hope you will do the same, and if not more, for this one. It's a very scary project. I've spoken to all the neighbors, and there's not a single person on that street who would not love to be here right now. And certainly, as we are all aware, the pandemic is limiting this. Otherwise, I'm sure it would be full in here to capacity. I ask you to truly do your due diligence and do everything that you can to keep these people within the rules, within the laws, and to stop this development. Thank you for your time.
Thank you. Any other members of the public for first time? Mr. Waters, you have some questions?
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. We heard a lot. So I'll touch on a few of the items that were mentioned by the delegations. With regards to notice, we issued notice in accordance with the Planning Act, and that was confirmed at the beginning of the meeting. There's a 20-day notice period that we comply with, in addition to posting on the website and advertising in the local newspapers. In terms of senior safety, pedestrian safety, I mean, there is a sidewalk on St. John's, on Bayview. The building is set back from the road. If there's any further response on that, I'll let the applicant deal with that. Environmental impacts to the valley to the east, the development block has already been established, so we're not encroaching into that natural heritage system. In terms of existing zoning, an applicant under the Planning Act is entitled to make an application to change the zoning, so nothing prohibits them from doing that. And in terms of parking overflow, I'm not aware of any parking permissions on Bayview or St. John's Side Road. Those are both arterial roads, and they don't have any on-site parking. And fit into the area, and it's too high, I guess that's somewhat a subjective statement. It really depends on how it fits in and how it blends in terms of massing and built form with the existing development at the intersection.
Thank you, Mr. Waters. And before I ask any members of the public that are here with us for a second time if they'd like to speak, we do have one member of the public on Zoom. So, and sorry, Mr. Clerk, your name is? Tanya? So we have Tanya joining us. So Tanya, if you could just state your name and your address, and you have 5 minutes.
Yeah, I just want to make sure that you can hear me well.
Yeah, I can hear you.
Perfect. Okay, so my name is Tanya Kluo, and I reside at 156 DeGraff Crescent, which directly backs onto the commercial plaza in question, directly to the east. I appreciate that some of these points may have already been said. However, I hope you appreciate the intensity that comes through and how passionate Aurorans are over this subject. As the commercial property at that northeast corner of Bayview and St. John's sits significantly higher than the subdivision to the east where we are located, having any unit over 1.5 stories high would undoubtedly infringe upon the privacy of those of us that reside directly behind the plaza. The land was always supposed to be for low-rise commercial when the lots were purchased, which commanded a significant premium for the privacy. The building where the Kelsey's Roadhouse is located, which is directly adjacent to the proposed multi-story unit in question, has the top of its 1.5-story building visible above the trees and green space that separate it from our homes. Having a unit that is over 4 times the height of that Kelsey's unit will, without a doubt, overreach the greenery and provide direct sight lines into our backyards, which we have paid significantly for. I would also like to point out that the green space that separates the plaza from the residents, those of us residents directly behind, are deciduous and therefore are completely bare in the winter, which would result in further privacy concerns. The commercial plaza is already very busy. Adding residential units with more vehicles and people would create even more congestion. I would strongly contest the comment made earlier by the proposer that a study was done to show no additional congestion would be incurred, as that it was also proposed with the addition of some of the other units in there. Currently, we see a significant number of vehicles turning east from Bayview onto St. John's and then performing illegal U-turns in order to enter the plaza as it is not accessible from eastbound St. John's. The addition of a residential unit would increase this chaos exponentially. There is a small green space, a creek, a pond, and wildlife, which would also undoubtedly experience environmental destruction with the construction of underground parking and residential structure, not to mention the increased noise during construction at all. In an era where many commercial spaces are being left vacant, and there are a few large commercial developments within Aurora that have been vacant for some time, is it not more responsible to look at a more environmentally friendly option of repurposing an existing space that has no current leaser with greater surrounding infrastructure in order to accommodate the type of unit and congestion as the proposal does? I feel like that's a more responsible avenue that we could examine as Aurorans. Affordable housing was originally proposed and now a seniors residence. Personally, I feel like this isn't an opportunity to continue with the pace of the feel of Aurora and what Aurorans are passionate about. It feels like an opportunity to erect another building for profit without thought to the fit of this community that many of us are proud of and what brought us or keeps us in Aurora. I thank you very much, Your Worship and Councillors, for the opportunity to speak this evening and for your time.
Thank you, Tanya. Are there any members of the public that would like to speak a second time? Seeing none, I will close the public portion of the meeting. Council, any questions for the applicant? Councillor Gilliland, questions to the applicant?
Thank you, through you, Mr. Mayor. I was just wondering, you had a drawing or a rendering up showing the parking situation, and I just wanted to have an idea where the accessible parking was in conjunction to the front door. I just couldn't understand that based on the drawing. If you could just clarify that for me. The accessible parking, I just wanted to know where that was in conjunction to where your front entrance was, because it seemed like it was far away, and I didn't have a chance to clarify where that entrance was.
Okay. All right. I'm sorry, I was having a hard time hearing you. My apologies. So is it which part of the parking through the chair?
So I see where your accessible parking is now. I just wanted to know where your main entrance is. Is it just right? If you could just, can you point to it with your, do you have a pointer that you can point to or no?
I don't know if I do have a pointer.
Kevin?
Is there a pointer here? I don't know if I have a pointer. I'm having a hard time hearing you through this, Lynn. So the parking that you're looking for, is it the drop-off parking or the entrance to the underground?
Sorry, through you, Mr. Mayor. I just wanted to know where your front entrance to your building, to your apartment buildings, were in conjunction to somebody who's accessible. Your parking seems like it's pretty far away in the middle of where the roundabout is, but the front entrance, I'm not so certain where it is. Is it down at the bottom of the circle? Is it down? Is it at the north end of the building? I'm just trying to understand in conjunction how close it is to the front entrance.
Yeah, so the prevalence, the parking is underground parking primarily. There are two levels of underground parking, so somebody coming into the building would access and their unit through an underground parking garage and then move up. We have we're showing some accessible parking spaces, and they're identified, and yes, and the pointer is on them, and that's the location of those as well. Yeah, and your comment, Dan, I understand now.
So I think, and Councillor, I'll clarify, Kevin, I think what the Councillor's asking is where is the location of the entrance comparable to those two accessible spots? Councillor, is that what you're asking?
Yeah.
Yes.
Right, yeah, so the location of the entrance then is off of the underneath the canopy in the turnaround area, so it would be in that area as well. So there.
So Councillor, right where the hand is right now.
Okay.
Okay.
Okay. Thank you. And is that parking considered your visitor parking then? Is that the intent of that parking?
Yes.
Yep.
There's visitor parking there as well as accessible parking, yes.
Councillor?
Gotcha. Comment, I like the fact that you have 20 spots for bicycle storage. I think that's really great. So you're encouraging some active transportation. That's correct?
Yes.
Okay, that's fantastic. If maybe you could touch on your traffic flow solution and kind of explain a little bit how you got to that and how it's improved traffic versus the way it was before. I think we'd be interested in hearing a little bit more detail about that.
Yes, I can provide you with that. So there was additional work done just on that to respond to that specific question. And of course, the site was initially planned and developed as a commercial use, and it would have a trip generation rate assigned to those uses throughout the day. So peak morning, peak afternoon, and Saturday traffic. What we've done is we've reduced the amount of square footage, of course, that was planned for commercial area, and looked at the trip generation rates for residential by comparison, and we found that there's a significant reduction in the trip generations for peak morning, peak afternoon and Saturday, in the order of about 50%. So that's it's responding to the question that was asked of us, whether that this residential proposal would have a net increase in trip generation, and in fact, the alternative is true.
Councillor?
Thank you, through Mr. Mayor. And just for the benefit of the public here today as well, if you could take that pointer and one of your slides show the exit in which a commuter would leave the apartment building from underground and go back and behind, and how they would exit to the light.
Right.
To, I guess, Bayview and then St. John's, because I understand there's only one way in it on St. John's. You can only go west.
Yeah,
So if you wouldn't mind just explaining that.
The right in, right out on St. John's, because of the median, restricts a left turn movement. Correct.
Do you have like a slide that would show it to help everybody see how that traffic flow would work?
Yes, just let me show where that is. Yeah. Okay. So that's going to be slide 8. All right. So this is showing St. John's Road, of course, and it's on the bottom of the sketch, and it's showing a right in. And of course, there's a median on St. John's Road, so there would be a right out, so you would not be able to turn left around in that area. So then you have the movement through the site, and you have the turnaround area going through. You would have a access on the westerly side of the building as well for underground parking. Okay.
Councillor?
Okay,
I think, and I'll add, because I think, Kevin, I think the councillor wants to see specifically where the traffic would flow if they wanted to head out to the traffic light that was at Bayview.
Right.
On that side of the plaza. So I think that's, the councillor wants to see a picture. Am I correct, councillor?
Oh, so you have the flow throughout the, through the site plan itself. Right, okay. No, I don't have a sketch that shows the whole of the site plan, showing the traffic through the plan itself and then out to the lights at Bayview. I don't have a sketch that's showing that. Certainly we would be able to develop that and provide that for you.
Okay, I thought we had one provided in our report that kind of gave us an idea of the overall traffic, but I guess I could ask staff when we come to that.
Okay.
Councillor?
Thank you. As far as your unit sizes, I was kind of, I love the fact that you are, you're advertising to the adults and seniors and you're offering some rental units, because I do believe that we do have, a housing crisis on our hands, and we do need to be able to provide homes for people in this bracket. But I was surprised to learn you only had 15 units with 1 bedroom, and the majority of them being 2-bedroom. And do you foresee that more of the older population will be housing in a 2-bedroom home? Because I kind of feel like that could also accommodate people, young families who maybe can't get into the market, and that's where they're going to start. I mean, I do feel that there's some flexibility with that. Do you foresee that that could be something that you'd be marketing to as well, or no?
Kevin?
No, I'm really responding to the applicant's intent in defining the market that they're trying to reach, and the prevalence of 1-bedroom and 2-bedroom units is really directed at a more seniors market. I can't speak to how it might be applied to others who might rent, but that's their target and that's their approach, is to the market they're trying to address with this development is a seniors market geared to 1 and 2 bedrooms in space.
Councillor?
Perfect. That's all for now. Thanks.
Thank you. I got Councillor Gartner, then Councillor Gallo. Councillor Gartner, questions to the applicant?
Could you start my video? I can't start it.
Rashida, are we able to start, Councillor?
Okay.
There you go.
Wow. I'm wearing blue. It looks a little purple. Just one question to the applicant. or the representative for the applicant, could you show that again where you've got the landscaping, the building with the landscaping around it?
I'm just going to check if I need to go forward or backwards here. I think it's...
Thank you. So, there's not a lot of landscaping here. We were talking about it's right up against the street, and there's some landscaping there. Do you have any idea how wide that strip is?
I don't have it dimensioned on my drawing, but I can tell you that the total landscaping area is about 682 square meters, so about 6,000, 7,000 square feet.
Councillor?
Okay, this is just a comment. To me, looking at this, for such a large building, that it looks like there's just very, very little landscaping space. So that's the way it appears on the drawing. Doesn't look like 6,000 square feet, but in any case, it's really pretty minimal, especially in between the plaza and the development. Thank you, that's it.
Thank you, Councillor. Councillor Gallo, questions to the applicant?
Thank you. I think, well, first off, and I think our planner had mentioned that the design review committee panel hasn't looked at this yet, and I think that's something significant that needs to be done. And I look forward to that whenever it comes. But apart from other issues, I would like to go back to traffic flow, because to me that just really doesn't make a lot of sense. I don't know if we can pull up Figure 7, which is page 48 of 53 in our agenda. Are we able to do that? It's the conceptual site plan.
Yeah, okay.
Councillor, I don't know, I'm not sure if he'll have it. Maybe Matthew, can we put that up on the screen? From the report?
It just gives us a real good sense of...
Yeah. Mr. Waters, do you want to give Matthew a hand? Or just...
It's page 48 of 53, or it's Figure 7, conceptual site plan.
We'll get it up in a second, Councillor. While we're waiting, can I get a motion to extend? Councillor Gilliland, Councillor Kim, all those in favor? Opposed? That carries.
Thank you. I think that's really helpful. I have to say that in my years sitting on council and public planning meetings, I don't recall ever seeing a residential development having to go through a plaza to get to a set of lights. If anyone in that building needs to go to the 404, and I suspect many of them will, they all have to go through that plaza, through that parking lot, make a left at the lights on Bayview, and then make another left on St. John's, or go down to south, one of the other streets. I have no idea how that could possibly be acceptable in any municipality, to be quite honest. It's just a total non-starter for me. It just doesn't happen. I have no idea how a consultant could possibly say that that's appropriate. How a traffic consultant can possibly agree with that traffic flow. You just shouldn't do it. There's no way you should do that. And I have many other questions, but to me that's a non-stopper. There's no way I could agree to this application based solely on that, amongst other things. But if it was only that, I certainly could not move forward on this application.
Thank you. Councillor Humphreys.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. So similar to Councillor Gallagher, just I keep looking at this spot and thinking, why would we want to build a residential area in a parking lot? But that's just me. It doesn't seem suitable for me. But I'm going to hear comments around the table, and then I'm sure the developer will have an opportunity to come back and answer. The only time I've ever seen going through a parking lot, a commercial parking lot, to get to something was in a couple of hotels that we travel across the states. You have to go through gas stations to get to, anyway, just, sorry, this doesn't seem right. It doesn't seem right for Aurora. It doesn't seem right for the residents that are going to be moving into this building and seniors. Also, I don't know about your traffic study through Mr. Mayor, but I've been there where they've had police have to help shoppers get in and out of the plaza because it's so busy in there. I can't imagine what it would be like to have residents having to go through there just to go in and out of their house. I can't see this myself. I've been trying to listen and be objective. We do need rental housing, absolutely. I just having a real time with this one, to be honest with you. I just, through Mr. Mayor, would you consider some of the official plan recommendations for this property? There's so many establishments that you could put here instead of a residential building. Maybe if the developer could take a look at that and see if there's any opportunities there. There's so many great things that they can build that would work within the commercial aspects of that plaza.
Kevin?
Would that be a consideration for the developer, or no, they're just looking at a residential building?
I think we've made an application here in earnest to bring a project forward that we believe in. I think the next steps for us that we see, and your comments, taken and understood, is to move forward with the site plan application, but go to design review committee and start to address some of the issues perhaps as they unfold, and perhaps we can bring something back that meets your expectations in that process. But I think at this point it's very early days in this application and in this process, and we're trying to find a plan and a program for this site that we think is appropriate in terms of providing for needed housing, needed accommodation,
absolutely,
and recognizing that the world around us is changing.
True.
And there are a number of sites and that we're involved in as a company, etc., that are seeing merging of residential and commercial properties moving forward. And I think finding the right mix for us here is perhaps something we have to continue to work on with staff in the design review committee. But we think there's something in this approach that is beneficial to the residents who would live there. But again, we have to perhaps look at how we might rework some parking or rework some aisles, and that's just paint on pavement, and come up with a way that I think is perhaps an easier way to address some of these issues that we're hearing.
Sure. Well, thank you, Mr. Mayor. Thank you very much. I appreciate your feedback and your comments, and it sounds like you're very willing to take a look at something, a little more suitable and that would work a lot better. So thank you. Again, I understand this is preliminary, but thank you for that feedback.
Yes.
Thank you.
Thank you.
That's all, Mr. Mayor.
Thank you. Councillor Kim for the first time, and then Councillor Gardner a second. Councillor Kim?
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. Just start with a comment, and when I looked at the plan, the image I had in my head was someone trying to pack for 7 days using a 3-day, package luggage. I feel like there's a lot of things trying to be squeezed into this space, and so the big issue I have is really regards to scale. Some of the amendments that are being asked for, maximum lot coverage of 47%, 6 stories, which is not an issue overall, but in that space it may be. a minimum amenity area of just 2.9 square meters and reducing the visitors' parking rate, all those things tell me that, we're trying to put in a larger scale project in a project that should be reduced somewhat. So that's my only issue in terms of the usage and all that. It's fine. I've never seen a residential in a retail commercial land use area, but I'm flexible to that. But for me, it's just more about scale. And when you're trying to squeeze so much into a smaller space, you get comments like Councillor Gardner stated, which is about the external landscaping, because you don't have space to nice up the area. So those are my comments, and I guess my question would be, to conclude, would be, is there an appetite for the Rice Group to bring down the scale of this project?
I think, as I said a little bit earlier, I don't want to speak for them in terms of their future intent, but I know, because I work on very similar applications, not just for the Rice Group, but for others, that 6-story size is really a magic size in terms of delivering affordability. And I think, so that drives the density, as you're saying, but beyond that, going to 4 or less, or towns, you're changing the economics of providing the kind of unit that you want with the underground parking, the amenities and such. So it's a challenge to look at a reduction in density and a balance to affordability. And so that's, I think, where a number of developers are trying to find the right fit in this particular market, which is the retirement market. And it tends to be in that range of about 6 stories, where you're not putting too much into the underground. You're able to manage the cost of the building and deliver a more affordable unit. The context of this building in this plaza, there's a thought that there would be a benefit in terms of proximity of shopping, et cetera, et cetera. So the challenge we're hearing in some of the comments that we need to work on are, what about access? And you mentioned squeezing in, I'm reading that, amenity areas and such, and how we can find a better balance. And so I think it's a model that's out there and that it's being achieved. Perhaps we just need to keep working with staff and the urban design group here to see if we can find that right balance on this site. That would be our intent, I think, in going forward.
Councillor?
Great, thank you.
Councillor Gardner, second time? Questions to the applicant?
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. I hope you'll permit me, I don't have a question for the applicant. I just wanted to thank the residents for coming out and staying, because it's such very late hour. It's unusual for public planning. And to Ms. Schellenhorn, I would like to thank her for her many years of police service. I think it's over 30. So, thank you.
Thank you, Councillor. Any other questions to the applicant? Seeing none, okay. We'll move to the application. Someone like to move the recommendation or make a recommendation? Council, I mean, and just from the comments I'm hearing around the table, instead of us going around, I would suggest either, I mean, from what I'm hearing, and I might be wrong, but I would suggest either to another public planning meeting, or if anyone wants to deny this application, I would suggest those are the two things that we'd be looking at putting forward right now, instead of just going around and then coming forward. So does someone want to put one of those two out? Or, I mean, if someone wants to put the general committee, that's up to them as well, but I'll leave it. Someone want to move something? Councillor Kemp?
Another public planning.
To another public planning meeting? Second act, Councillor Humphreys, okay. Comments or questions? Councillor Gallo?
Just quickly, I think that's appropriate. I mean, although I have some serious issues with this, let's give them a chance to see if they can resolve it. I'll be open-minded. I'm going to say that it's going to be tough, but let's give them a second chance and see if they can come up with something different.
Thank you. Councillor Gilliland?
Thank you, through you, Mr. Mayor, to Mr. Waters. Just quickly, I know we had conversations, and I'd like you to confirm, as far as the stormwater management, that's been determined that it already has the capacity to accept the water from this development.
Mr. Waters?
Through you, Mr. Mayor, I believe they will be providing storage tanks on site, and there would be on-site storage as well, and then some release into the creek to the east as well. So it's a combination of techniques to deal with the stormwater.
Councillor?
Thank you. A couple of questions here. So if there was any amendments to this policy, I'm assuming that it would go in accordance with our own OP in regards to the environment. Should we make those amendments?
Mr. Waters?
Through you, Mr. Mayor, I'm not clear on the councillor's question. If you could...
Councillor, could you repeat
I'll
that?
ask that offline.
Oh, you'll ask that offline?
That's
okay,
fine.
thank you.
That's fine. As far as, I know that there were some comments that were made about the property standards within the rental units, and I would just wonder if maybe, through you, Mr. Mayor, to, I don't know, if Ms. Van Leeuwen or whoever could kind of touch on that as far as the accountability from the building owners as far as rentals. Do we have a policy in place for that, and property standards for these types of buildings?
Mr. Waters, can you answer that, or did you want us to speak to Ms. Van Leeuwen about that?
Through you, Mr. Mayor, I'll touch base with Alex and our bylaw manager and tell him about the comments we heard tonight.
Okay.
Thank you.
Councillor?
Thank you.
Thank you. Councillor Humphries, okay. Councillor Gardner, and then Councillor Thompson. Councillor Gardner?
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. I was on council when the zoning was changed. The zoning in this area was, in this piece of land, was neighborhood commercial, which was just to serve the residents in the area. The residents were quite upset because the developer wanted to change it to community commercial, and they did get that, and that is why we have this very large and very busy plaza. There never was an intent to do anything else with the land that was left over. So I'm really surprised that this has come forward. But it's, it's just way too dense. And as a non-starter for myself, I would say that forcing the apartment residents to drive through a plaza that is, well, sometimes I think you could call it chaotic, to drive through this plaza, I can't understand why we would allow this. I know we want rental, but it has to be in the appropriate place, and it has to be set up appropriately. But this land has already been overdeveloped, having gone in our OP as to be a neighborhood commercial. So I'm not in favor of developing it any further. And, as we've said, the residents were in place in this area before this was developed as a plaza. And the surrounding neighborhood is low density or low to medium density. And what is allowed in this whole OPA 30 area is maximum stacked row houses, terraced houses, excuse me, and street row houses. This 2B area was never envisioned to have this kind of development. I don't think it was envisioned to have any kind of apartment building on it, a condo or an apartment building. I don't believe there is anything else in the 2B area. So I think that this development is completely inappropriate. And it was mentioned about the environmental effect. We don't have very much about that in this report, but one of the reasons why it was supposed to be neighborhood commercial, a small plaza, was because it is in a a rather important, sensitive environmental area. So just the way this building is encroaching on the area, I mean, it's not encroaching on the area, but it's right next to it. There's going to be runoff into the environmental area. There's going to be the effect of construction on the area. There's going to be the added noise. So, and a question to you, Mr. Waters. When something is, I mean, this is market rent, and sometimes rental does have its problems, but could this be changed? Could the developer get permission to do this and then change it into a condo? Through Mr. Mayor?
Mr. Waters?
Through you, Mr. Mayor, the applicant, we can't specify tenure in a zoning bylaw or an official plan amendment. So the proposal is for an apartment building at the density they're proposing. Whether it's, and there's no, and the bylaw doesn't contain any different ratios for condo apartments versus rental apartments. So from staff's perspective, it's an apartment building.
Councillor?
Thank you very much. So, you know, if somebody was going on the basis that this is providing rental housing, that's not necessarily what the reality is going to be. It may not be rental. That's up to the developer. So, as I said, I think that there are so many issues with this that it should be denied outright. So I'll be voting against the motion on the table.
Thank you, Councillor. Councillor Thompson?
Thank you. I share some of the same concerns that's been voiced tonight by my colleagues around the table. However, we have worked successfully with this group in the past and other projects that they have in the town of Aurora, so I'm supportive of it going to a future public planning meeting and allow staff and the applicant to sit down and try and address the concerns that have been raised here tonight, as they have done in the past.
Thank you, Councillor. Councillor Humphreys?
To you, Mr. Mayor, sorry, I changed my mind. I just wanted to add that, yes, we've had some great work with this developer in the past. They're great. I know they listen intently. I wasn't going to mention it, but I wanted to add. I just, take a really good look at what's available in this zoning area, and let's do what we can, if possible, to meet that criteria. And if not, whatever it is, let's hope we can do something that we can all be proud of, residents and ourselves. Thank you.
Thank you. Councillor Gilliland, second time.
Thank you, through you, Mr. Mayor. I agree with Councillor Thompson's remarks there, and I look forward to another public planning meeting. Just a quick question through you, Mr. Mayor, Mr. Waters. This concept, I know there's some comments around the table about building residential condos or rental apartments combined with retail. Is this becoming somewhat more of a trend within the building community or planning community in this regard?
Mr. Waters?
Through you, Mr. Mayor. Yes, it's a trend that we're seeing across the GTA where residual parking lots or parking spaces on the edge of a shopping center are being redeveloped for higher density apartments. We're seeing that in Vaughan. We're seeing that out in the west part of the GTA. It's a trend that seems to be happening. It's what the growth plan is pushing in terms of infilling and intensification. And we're also seeing a decline in retail as well. So, there is, with COVID and the shift towards, less retail development with online shopping, we're going to see a lot more of this, I think, in my view.
Councillor?
Thank you very much.
Any other comments or questions? Call the vote. Everyone in? Councillor Gardner, how are you voting?
I voted yes.
Yes, thank you.
No.
Oh, no. Oh, okay. I thought you said yes. Sorry. No.
I voted yes.
Oh, I thought you said, okay. You vote no. I appreciate it. Okay. Councillor Gardner's a no. Before she hits me over the head for saying yeah. That carries. Okay, council confirming bylaw? Councillor Gallo, Councillor Thompson? Call the vote? Councillor Gardner on the confirming bylaw?
Yes.
Yes, thank you. That carries. Motion to adjourn? Councillor Kim, Councillor Gilliland, all those in favor? Opposed? That carries. We are adjourned. Thank you, everyone. East Sky.